this, and particularly when you have depression or anxiety, that sense of helplessness, worthlessness can be very debilitating, and it can send you on a downward spiral, make it very hard for you to get well. And yet if you have work, if you have a sense of purpose, if you have a mission, if you like, if you have goals, if you get improvements in your work and you get promoted, all of those things can be very beneficial. And the third thing, of course, is that in the workplace, we form human connections. We are very relational creatures, human beings. We come into this world physically joined to another person, and that is our template. We are longing for connection.
GB News, the People's Channel.
All too often, people will be sitting at home watching a press conference live, and they'll hear loads of questions being asked, and they'll be thinking, that's not my question, that's not my concern.
We don't care whose feathers we ruffle. We ask the questions that you want answering.
You're all standing on the street protesting and want to have an open discussion.
My name is Patrick Christie's. I do a show for GB News in the UK. Is it possible to talk to you quickly?
Journalism in this country has been a cosy world full of groupthink until now.
Well, this is the best view ever of Whitehall, looking out across all the tractor drivers of England who've come together to make their point.
Hello, so as you can see, I'm here in Westminster as the protest begins.
Yes, I'm very much in the thick of it.
Look, we're challenging narratives here at GB News, and that's what sets us apart.
Good morning, it's 9:30 on Tuesday, the 18th of November, live across the UK, Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Miriam Cates.
Well, the Home Secretary tells GB News her plans to fix Britain's broken borders.
What I can see happening is division. Anger and resentment can turn to hate. It's a human frailty, and I can see this happening in our country. It's my job to stop that drift towards hate, to offer people solutions that can work, that can dissipate the anger and the resentment they're feeling.
Well, this came just a few hours after the Home Secretary outlined her changes to the asylum system in Parliament.
Unfortunately, I am the one that is regularly called and told to go back home. It is I who knows through my personal experience and that of my constituents just how divisive the issue of asylum has become.
Well, the Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch, liked what she was hearing.
But I am pleased that she is bringing forward measures to crack down on illegal immigration. It's not.
And the co-leader of the Green Party, Carly Adenya, did not approve.
Attempting to out-reform reform is actually just boosting this baseless far-right narrative.
And not everybody in Labour supports the Home Secretary either. Here is the Nottingham East Labour MP, Nadia Whittam.
It's shameful that a Labour government is ripping up the rights and protections of people who have endured unimaginable trauma.
Elsewhere, Farage is on a foreign aid crusade. The Reform UK leader will set out his plan to fill the £25 billion black hole in the budget, and foreign aid would be drastically cut.
And at the same time, the Tory leader, Kemi Badenoch, will set out her alternatives to tax rises, which the Chancellor is set to unveil in that budget next week.
Now, the Prime Minister is insisting that he will lead his party into the next general election, but a new poll shows that half of Labour voters want him to quit.
And as the rubbish piles up in Birmingham, Labour-controlled, of course, Unite the Union threatens to extend the bin workers' strike until next May. Agency workers covering them are joining the picket line too.
It was an astonishing performance from Shabana Mahmood in the House of Commons yesterday. She was energetic, she was passionate, articulate, and she saw off all comers, didn't she?
And I've never, ever heard such a senior cabinet minister use those two words before. She used an expletive and she used a pejorative term of racist abuse, which she's often subjected to. I think you can work out what she said. But I thought it was powerful and extraordinary. And you can see this is turning out to be Keir Starmer's cleverest appointment.
Yes, absolutely.
But I'm still not sure any of this is going to work.
I know.
How is this going to stop the small boats flooding across the channel? She virtually admitted that.
Yeah, that it probably won't stop asylum seekers. But without changing primary legislation, without getting rid of the Human Rights Act or amending the Human Rights Act, it's going to be very, very difficult. And she probably has not got the parliamentary support to do that. Although Kemi Badenoch has said that she will lend Tory votes, but that would be a political disaster for Labour.
And of course, if they don't stop the boats, this is the end of Shabana Mahmood.
Well, that's right.
The
although
Home Secretary will bite the dust.
Exactly. Although Kemi Badenoch did say, quite appreciatively in the Commons yesterday, that Shabana Mahmood had done more in 70 days than her predecessor had done in a year. Faint praise.
Indeed. Well, as ever, we want to know what you think. Send your views, post your comments by visiting
gbnews.com/your say. But first, here's your 60-second news update with Sam Francis.
Very good morning to you from the newsroom. 9:30. The headlines this hour. The Home Secretary says she can get her asylum overhaul through Parliament. That's despite pushback from parts of Labour. Shabana Mahmood insists most of her party backs a fairer system. Tory leader Kemi Badenoch says the plans, though, don't go far enough, but hinted Conservatives may help vote them through. A major crackdown on online prices is underway. The Competition and Markets Authority has launched its first investigations under new consumer powers, targeting companies including StubHub, Viagogo, BSM driving schools and Wayfair. It follows a review into hidden fees and pressure selling, with 100 more firms warned to clean up their tactics. Rachel Reeves is facing a political pincer movement, with the Conservatives and Reform UK accusing her of planning tax rises to fix her budget black hole. Nigel Farage is pitching $25 billion in savings by cutting foreign aid and restricting benefits for foreign nationals. Meanwhile, Kemi Badenoch claims Labour is plotting a stealth tax bombshell, something the party strongly denies. A landmark UN vote has endorsed President Trump's Gaza peace plan, approving a temporary international force and a new transitional board of peace. Trump has welcomed the move, but Hamas rejected it, saying it won't disarm without a Palestinian state. Well, the UK has backed that resolution, and the Foreign Secretary wants aid to flood into Gaza. Yvette Cooper says all crossings must now open immediately. Donald Trump says the vote will lead to further peace across the world. And teacher well-being is now at its lowest since 2019, according to Education Support, with more than three-quarters reporting symptoms of poor mental health. The government says pay rises and behaviour reforms are helping. Those are the headlines for now. A full roundup from me at 10.
Tune into GB News Radio wherever you are, online, on DAB digital radio, on TuneIn, on Radio Player and on your smart speaker. Just say, play GB News.
Hello, good morning and welcome. You're watching and listening to Britain's Newsroom. We're live across the United Kingdom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Miriam Cates.
Well, it was a stonking performance, wasn't it? The Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, in the Commons chamber. She says it's the biggest shake-up of the asylum system in modern times.
Well, she gave a passionate defence on how she plans to fix the broken system. But, of course, she's faced a lot of backlash from Labour MPs and the Green Party. Andrew, lots of people commenting in the papers today about what a good performance it was and what good headlines she's had. But at the end of the day, the changes that she wants to implement are probably not going to reduce the number of small boats.
No.
And they seem to be taking inspiration from the Danish system, which have a much harder line on immigration. But Denmark is a tiny country. They have a land border, which they're able to police, and they're able to check people every 30 months because it's such a small number of people. We've got 100,000 people in the system.
Yeah, but it was change of direction, change of tone, change of rhetoric. There is a Labour backlash, but it's not massive.
No.
And some of them are the usual suspects. I think they'll be very worried that the Tony Vaughan, who is the MP for Folkestone, now Labour have never won that seat before, ever. They won it the last election. He is a KC. He was in the same human rights chambers as Keir Starmer, and he's one of the most outspoken critics of it. And Folkestone is an area which is in the eye of the storm because Kent has been, frankly, overrun with illegal migrants.
Well, you're right. They should worry less about Labour backbenchers and more about human rights lawyers and all the charities that surround them, because the minute there is a family or a person who is either wrongly deported or who has particularly tragic circumstances, and there will be those, these will become clear-cut cases and the public will be told that it's not fair, it's not humane. It's going to be incredibly difficult to get this through. But, I mean, good on her for trying. but she's got an uphill battle, hasn't she?
She has, and also I still don't see what the deterrent is to stop them getting in a small boat.
Absolutely.
Because they'll still go into a hotel, they'll get some form of benefits, and it'll take months and months and months to process their asylum applications.
That's right, and some of the countries that they've already agreed will have visa sanctions if they don't take failed asylum seekers back, really contribute just a tiny, tiny number of asylum seekers to the system. And what I'm really worried about is the expansion of the Homes to Ukraine scheme to other countries in the world.
But also, it says in the Home Office documents that they're looking at third-party countries. So another form of Rwanda. Well, Rwanda was mocked by Labour in opposition. Obviously, Rwanda would be out of the question. But what other countries would want to process these asylum?
Especially as more and more other countries are now going down this route. There's a much higher demand than there was a few years ago.
Well, GB News political editor Chris Hope sat down with the Home Secretary after her big statement yesterday. Let's have a listen to what she said to him.
So the concern about migration is something that is shared by British people of every background,
of all race,
every ethnicity in this country. And I think that that should be acknowledged, because you have to acknowledge what people are thinking. It's wrong to say people feel that way when it's actually true. They are responding to facts. They can see a broken system because the system is in fact broken. The pace and scale of change that we have seen has put communities under pressure. And I think it is the job of politicians, mainstream politicians, to come up with answers to the problems that the public rightly see are happening in this country. And there are some people in politics today who think you can either ignore the problem and just assert that it's not there and that somehow it's made up, it's misinformation, fake news, and if you just don't talk about it, it will somehow go away. There are others who will speak the language of inclusion and support for diversity, which I also agree with, but who will then not look to any solutions for the problems that we face. So they will shut down any possible solution and then therefore they are hypocrites because they have nothing else to offer. What I am offering is a genuine set of proposals that can fix the broken system that we have and retain public consent for us having an asylum system at all. That is the way that I think sensible mainstream politicians should approach these issues, because we can see the problems they're causing in our communities and it's our job to fix it. Judge me on delivery. I want to get those boat crossings down. I'm not going to set arbitrary
But they will
numbers.
fall next year.
I want to see them fall, of course I do, as we implement these reforms. I would say to your viewers and to people across the country, judge us on the totality of the reforms once they're being implemented. I believe the combination of these reforms and our law enforcement activity can fix this problem and can bring those numbers down.
If they don't work, you'll go further. You pull back from ECHR withdrawal, which of course is what Reform and the Tories are doing. Other ideas you could push too?
Well, look, I will always, of course, keep under review whether these measures are working as they should, but we've announced the set of proposals today. We've now got to consult and bring forward legislation. That will be the next stage, and then we've got to crack on with delivery as well.
GBNews viewers watching this, listening to this, will be frustrated. You're not saying numbers will come down. You hope they will. You can't say it.
Look, I know it's a low trust environment, right? I know that people will say that we've heard all of this before. I get that. I know there's a lot of cynicism. That it's justified. So I'm not telling your viewers that they are wrong to feel or think as they do. Just judge us on our record.
Well, that was Shabana Mahmood speaking to Chris Hope yesterday, and the political commentator Andy Williams joins us now. Andy, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Shabana Mahmood there saying that we should judge her on her record. She's just set out her plans to reform the asylum system. What do you think her chances are of achieving what she's said?
Well, clearly this goes further than Labour have gone so far, much further than anything they've done so far, and much further than anything the Tories did over the last 14 years as well. I mean, these are really quite radical plans, I think, and any suggestion that they don't go far enough. I mean, this is hard line. I mean, I really do think it's hard line. Now, of course, you're going to get the usual suspects on the left of the Labour Party who really dislike this. I mean, you could have predicted that Nadia Whitten was going to stand up and have a go at this policy. But I have to say there are elements of this that I feel quite uncomfortable with too. I mean, the idea that we are putting genuine refugees in such limbo that they can't apply for residence for 20 years, that they might be removed at such a point that their home country becomes safe. You know, I do have challenges with that. I think we need to separate out the the issue we have with economic migrants coming over on small boats, and we know that's about 75% of people who are coming on small boats, and genuine refugees who are fleeing persecution and who are fleeing harm and danger. So there are aspects of this that I do think are worrying.
If they're genuine refugees, Andy, why don't they come to Britain legally? Because if they can afford the £4,000 to cross the channel on a small dinghy, why don't they just pitch up on a plane?
Because the process makes that really quite... The process makes that really quite... It's not as simple as that. And I think we have to remember that people who are really, really desperate, you know, who feel they have no alternative but to flee. If you're a genuine refugee, you're not coming to Britain because you think, oh, I quite fancy it. You're coming because you feel you have absolutely no alternative. You're desperate. And I think we have to strike the balance here between acknowledging the wishes and the feelings of the British people that they don't want to be overrun by people coming over illegally, but equally having some compassion for people who are in horrendous...
But Andy, we don't use that argument for example, shoplifting. We don't use the argument, oh, well, I was desperate. We say it's a crime. Now, you might get a reduced sentence or there might be other supports available, but it's still a crime. It's a crime to come here illegally on a small boat. The role of the government is to punish crime and to uphold justice. It's black and white, isn't it?
No, I don't think it is black and white. I think we have to we have to separate out the political aspect of this from the moral and ethical aspect, right? So politically, is this a smart thing to do? Absolutely. You know, the last reshuffle was all about getting Shabana Mahmood in as Home Secretary because Keir Starmer knew she was the most hardline person on this issue in the cabinet, and he knew that she would take much tougher action than Yvette Cooper took. And actually, for once, Kemi Badenoch was right on that one. But from a moral, ethical standpoint, I do think we have to look at it from the perspective of having compassion for people who have found themselves through no fault of their own in really, really dangerous, life-threatening circumstances. So I'm not saying I disagree with all of this. I think there are some really good aspects of...
So what do you disagree with, Andy? What do you disagree with?
So the issues I mentioned on refugees and having to wait up to 20 years for settlement, I don't agree with that. I think that's an incredibly long time. I mean, 20 years, 2 whole decades to be in limbo. I don't think that serves the purpose of integration. You know, if we want people to integrate into Britain when they come over here, to say, well, you can't be a citizen for 20 years, that doesn't seem to serve that objective. I think the idea that you would have the threat of being sent back to your home country the moment it's deemed safe, which in itself is not a black and white question. I've concerns about that. I've real concerns about the symbolism and the actuality of confiscating assets of people to pay
they won't do that, Andy. They've hardly ever done that in Denmark. I think they've done it 16 times in 5 years.
17 times in 6 years, I know that, but the symbol, I do think there is a problem with the symbolism of that, right? And I don't want to go down the road that some people have gone down, but I find that really, really distasteful. Having said that, new appeals process, new independent body to fast track the appeals process, that's very welcome and definitely needed. So there are some good things in here, but I just think, you know, even people like me who are much more on Shabana Mahmood's wing of the Labour Party will feel uncomfortable with aspects of this.
All right, Andy, that's Andy Williams, political commentator. Interesting perspective, I think.
I think we've lost our minds on this. I think the idea 20 or 30 years ago that we shouldn't just have a border and that no one should cross it, and if they do, they should be sent back. I think that's not an extreme position.
You land in the dinghy. Thanks very much. We're taking you straight back. Straight back.
And if you don't have that, unfortunately, it will tempt all sorts of people to come here.
And give up on the French of taking the responsibility. It's hopeless. Now, still ahead, while the whole of the Labour government is prioritising on Shabana Mahmood's speech, Keir Starmer, tone deaf as ever, gives an interview to the Daily Mirror, which of course is a sympathetic paper, saying he will lead his party into the next general election, despite the fact a new poll says nearly half of Labour voters says he should quit and go now.
And up next, both Kemi Badenoch and Nigel Farage will set out their plans for an alternative budget this morning. But why are they doing it at the same time?
But we're going to give you some of that elusive holiday sun, so stay tuned.
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
It's going to be an unsettled week across eastern parts of the Mediterranean with intense thundery rain by the weekend. Further west, it's drier, but there will be some rain around northern coastal parts of Spain, also pushing into parts of Portugal and West Spain as well. Also some rain across southern Italy, but it's further east affecting Greece, Albania, Croatia and other nearby nations. This is where we're going to have the heaviest, most thundery rain, particularly as we go Friday and into Saturday. Bye-bye.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
No matter the state it's in, this is our nation. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for a genuine, honest discussion on where we have been, where we are going, and where we are with the people who set the direction. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
They do say, Oggy, that we are what we eat. Just, looking up and down. But anyway, I mean, during your sporting career, when you was a cricketer, you'd have been a lot slimmer, eating different food probably, a different regime. Tell us about
that. To be fair, wasn't eating a lot of different food, but I was active. I went into the gym, I was on a cricket pitch 5 days out, and you burned the food off, so you didn't have to really watch what you ate. Yeah. And for the last 12 years, I've been putting things in and not burning them off.
Okay, so, yeah, it's time to take it up. But you're a Yorkshireman. And you play cricket for Yorkshire. It's a great honour for a Yorkshireman, isn't it, to play cricket for his
Massively,
county?
yeah.
Because back in the day, you had to be born in Yorkshire, didn't you, to actually play for Yorkshire?
Yeah, I was born back in Yorkshire. My mum and dad were in Pelsall. We moved back into Yorkshire, so I was born in the county, so I was allowed to play for it. But I was a late bloomer. 18, I wasn't playing for the academy, and I got a Yorkshire contract late on. And it just went really, really quickly.
So how does it work? A lot of young people playing these sports at school and that, they played probably football, rugby and cricket, weren't they? Is that you?
Yeah, so at school, I went to a comprehensive school that had a choice of football or football. Yeah. Wasn't my favourite sport, but I wanted to play sport, so I played football for school, and then in the winter I played rugby for my local rugby club, and then cricket for my local cricket club in the summer.
So when did it really start for you at cricket then? So when did that penny drop that you wanted to be a cricketer?
A big piece of luck. Phil Carrick came into Pudsey Kongs, who was an ex-Yorkshire captain, saw me playing third team and put me in the first team.
Really?
And so I was
Why?
17,
Why did he do
18.
that?
He saw something in me. I don't know, because everybody else had overlooked me. I think it's because I swung the ball away.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
It's 9 minutes to 10. Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Well, Tory leader Kemi Bader and Reform leader Nigel Farage are both going to set up their alternatives to the budget at exactly the same time. Now, this doesn't normally happen. There's something called a political grid. Chris Hope, who's our fabulous political editor, are the Tories trying to think if we speak at the same time, all the broadcasters will go to us because we're the official opposition? But Reform are way ahead in the polls. They're the unofficial
They don't
opposition.
coordinate very well, do they? And I don't think... Why they're trying to change the subject from what Labour are talking about, which is actually a very strong policy on the borders, perhaps they're trying to sort of obscure... because the budget is an issue, that's next Wednesday. Yeah. Today's story is all about what Siobhan Mahmood told us last night in the Home Office and told MPs yesterday tea time, and it is an extraordinary moment here. I think maybe what they're both worried about is if they get this right, then Reform's lead might fall away. If they can secure that southern border, sort out the NHS and maybe find a way to get the economy growing, Labour are looking suddenly
But if they get it wrong...
Well, we're going towards ECHR. I do think given that interview with Shabana Mahmood last night that we did for GB News, we have moved a step towards, weirdly, leaving the European Convention on Human Rights, because if this doesn't work, and they won't give us the measurables to judge them by, but if this doesn't stop the boats and deal with the issue, then the rivals, Tories and Reform, others will say, well, let's leave ECHR.
There would be major cabinet resignations if Starmer said, and Starmer himself is so wedded to the ECHR, he is a human rights lawyer.
What is going on with this government, though? So these are great front pages, I think, for the Labour government.
Telegraph headline, Mahmood turns their blue and blast at Liberals.
Look at
Daily
this.
Mail really probes.
And that was shocking when she used the effing P word in the House of Commons at tea time. Broadcasters breaking into it to apologise. But look at the papers which are friendly towards Labour. You've got this rebellion already on page 1 of The Guardian. And they gave an interview, didn't they, to the Daily Mirror, in which they're saying here, I mean, that this is...
So Starmer's given an exclusive interview to the Mirror, which will distract attention away from the message of that hardline...
So are they nervous about it? Are they nervous about the messaging here? The base won't like it, the members won't like it, so let's give them...
Because it's too... And what was quite conspicuous, I thought, when Shabana Mahmood made her comment statement yesterday, Chris, you would have expected the Prime Minister to be sat firmly next to her, showing massive support. He wasn't there. Why not?
Quite obviously doing other things, but he should have been there. And this is a real moment, though, if they get this right...
Because a human rights lawyer doesn't like what his Home Secretary's doing. A Prime Minister who's not in control of his government.
Well, much more on that later. Up next, we'll be hearing from Nigel Farage, who wants to cut the foreign aid budget. You're watching Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hello, very good morning to you. This is your GB News weather update from the Met Office. We have cold Arctic air pushing its way across the country at the moment, and that's going to bring some rain, yes, but also a bit of snow and ice. The rain's mainly across parts of Scotland, also feeding into northern England and North Wales, and there is some hill snow mixed in with this. The highest ground of northern England seeing something a bit wintry, but modest higher ground over parts of Scotland could see some wet snow down to around 150 metres or so, and perhaps 5 to 10 centimetres building up over the higher ground. Staying drier towards the south, but a few showers pushing through. For all places, a chilly feel for sure. Coldest in the north, some places struggling to get above freezing. Could see highs in just about the double figures across the far south. As we go into this evening then, more wintry weather across some higher ground of Scotland. Showery rain around the coastal parts, but modest higher ground, likely to see further snow building up as we go through the end of the day. Showers piling into northern parts of Northern Ireland. Some of these could be falling as sleet or snow, as can the showery bursts of rain across northern parts of England and Wales over the highest ground at least. Staying dry towards the south and southeast, clearer skies as we go through the evening and overnight. The showery rain, sleet and snow across northern parts gradually making its way further southwards. The further south it gets, the less likely you are to see anything wintry. That being said, some sleet or snow is possible across higher ground towards central parts. Clearer skies coming into parts of northern and western Scotland in particular, and here temperatures could really drop. A harsh frost, some icy patches, and we could see temperatures dropping into negative double figures perhaps. Later on as we go into tomorrow, we are going to see some showery rain pushing across parts of the southeast. Don't really expect any sleet or snow here, and then otherwise showers piling down on that cold northerly wind, so coastal parts towards the northeast and west seeing some showers. Some of these could be a bit wintry at times, more inland areas staying dry but pretty cold.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Thank you, Britain, for our more than 2 million YouTube subscribers and more than 2 billion views. That is Britain watching, sharing and making its voice heard louder than ever before.
Good morning. This is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. The M4 westbound has a lane closed due to an accident between junction 39 Grows and junction 40 Tieback. Expect some delays there. In Blackburn with Darwin, there is a collision on the M65 westbound between junctions 4 and 3. One lane is shut, causing delays of up to 1 hour. In Oxfordshire, the M40 southbound entry slip at junction 7 has been closed due to a traffic collision. All lanes are currently shut. And on the trains, East Midlands Railway is experiencing disruption between Stoke-on-Trent and Derby. and the Elizabeth line shows delays between London Paddington and Heathrow terminals as well as Reading. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
There's just 2 weeks left to see how you could win your Christmas this year paid for by us. First, we'll give you an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash. Then we'll give you a further £10,000 cash to spend on all your Christmas presents, even the tree. Christmas lunch, that's on us too, with £1,000 in shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite supermarket. Finally, a GB News Christmas goodie bag. For another chance to win, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB17 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 28th of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes and Kerr weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 10 o'clock on Tuesday, the 18th of November. We're live across the United Kingdom. This is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Miriam Kate.
So the Home Secretary tells GB News about her plans to fix Britain's busted borders.
What I can see happening is division. Anger and resentment can turn to hate. It's a human frailty, and I can see this happening in our country. It's my job to stop that drift towards hate, to offer people solutions that can work, that can dissipate the anger and the resentment they're feeling.
Well, this came just a few hours after the Home Secretary outlined her changes to asylum in Parliament.
Unfortunately, I am the one that is regularly called and told to go back home. It is I who know through my personal experience and that of my constituents just how divisive the issue of asylum has become.
Well, you don't often hear language like that from a Cabinet Minister in the Commons, do you? But quite right, fair to say it, I think. Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch sort of like what she heard.
I am pleased that she is bringing forward measures to crack down on illegal immigration. It's not enough, but it is a start.
But the co-leader of the Green Party, Carla Denyer, didn't approve.
Attempting to out-reform reform is actually just boosting this baseless far-right narrative.
And not everybody in the Labour Party supports the Home Secretary either. Here's the Nottingham East MP, Nadia Whittam.
It's shameful that a Labour government is ripping up the rights and protections of people who have endured unimaginable trauma.
Well, right on cue, again across to Reform UK's Nigel Farage and Zia Youssef at a press conference.
The explosion in sheer numbers of those living on a variety and range of benefits, totally uncontrolled mass migration, and certainly not selective migration, and people leaving the country. Not just the non-doms, but wealthy big taxpayers, young entrepreneurs leaving the country. It's a pretty grim situation. And that was all under the Conservative Party. But now we have a Labour government, and we have 8 very long days to go until the budget. I say long days because it just seems to go on forever and ever, and we get a brief or a leak of one kind, and then it's denied. And frankly, no one quite knows exactly what details will be in the budget, but there are a couple of things that we can predict, I think, with a very high degree of accuracy. The first is this budget, like the last one, will be an attack on aspiration, an attack on Alarm Clock Britain, an attack on those who get up in the morning. This budget will do nothing for the 5.6 million very brave men and women who act as sole traders or run their own businesses, without which the British economy, frankly, would grind to a halt. And I think we can say with some confidence that this budget will be very, very good for those who don't want to work and want to live on benefits, which is very different to a civilised society looking after those that are unable to look after themselves. And it'll be an attack on jobs. I have to say, I thought the budget last year, you could increase the minimum wage for young people, but if at the same time you bring down to £5,000 the level at which an employer starts to pay national insurance, is it any wonder that there are 50,000 fewer under 18s in employment today than there were this time last year, which culturally I think is an absolute disaster. What is clear is that the markets are increasingly nervous. I know that Andy Burnham thinks that doesn't matter, but actually the bond markets in the end are enormously powerful, as Liz Truss's government found to their cost. And amidst all of this, we have a Chancellor who is absolutely hopelessly out of her depth to a level that, frankly, it's embarrassing. It was Lee Anderson that called her Rachel from accounts during PMQs some time ago, and that really stuck. Although Lee now says he feels sorry for her on a human level, and actually, I think we can all understand that. So what we're going to get is a budget that'll be drafted by left-wing think tanks, a budget that'll be drafted by people who've never run a business, who've never had a proper job in their lives, and that's the level of disconnect that exists. Now, I do think we're setting the pace on a number of things. I thought, despite her protestations, I thought a lot of what Shabama Mahmood said yesterday was driven directly by fear that Labour are losing votes, particularly in the Red Wall, to reform. And rhetorically, we would agree with a lot of what the Home Secretary said. Indeed, there are some of us that thought it might just be a pitch. Maybe that's our next defector, I'm not sure. If her backbenchers vote against her, that could become a bigger likelihood. There was no doubt, as I say, that we led the agenda on that illegal migration is making the country very, very angry, and she said it's, tearing the country apart. But economically, it is legal migration that is doing enormous damage to the British economy, and it's been so difficult to even talk about this subject without being screamed down. But just look at the direct link between falls in productivity and the mass importation of unskilled labour. In fact, that trend has been there now for the best part of 20 years. There are enormous costs to our benefit system of those, not just illegally, but legally have come in to our country. And today, Zia is going to address some of that, as indeed we've touched on before. The idea that will get put at an alternative press conference today, which I understand is going on at the same time as this one, is that somehow reform support a ballooning benefits bill, and yet we're the ones proposing the most radical cuts to benefits in numerical terms that have ever been seen in the history of this country. So I'm going to ask Zia to lay out our key 5 points today. We'll then, of course, take questions on that and anything else, as we always do. But I want you to bear in mind, with all the numbers that Zia is about to give you, these are before the Boris wave, before the Boris wave begin to become eligible. And for everything the Home Secretary has said about extending a number of years you have to be in Britain to qualify, whether it's for ILR, whether it's for benefits, I don't see any changes happening to the Boris wave, and those numbers will start to hit by the end of this year, predicted by some think tanks to perhaps be one of the single biggest economic mistakes this country has ever made in its history. I'll now hand over for some of the details, although you might have heard them already on broadcast media this morning. I'll hand over to our Head of Policy, Zia Yusuf.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming and for watching, if you're watching this on a live stream. So, tough decisions need to be made is the refrain of the political class for years, decades now. British citizens constantly being told that they need to tighten their belts and they've got to accept paying ever more tax for ever worse public services. While that's been happening, as we're about to lay out, there has been the most extraordinary ballooning of British taxpayer expense being funneled to foreign nationals, including on our own shores, that you could possibly believe. The British state exists to serve British citizens. That is quite a radical idea these days in Westminster, which is why Nigel gets heckled whenever he says such a thing inside the House of Commons. But that is what it is for. And so, yes, we agree. The country is in an enormous amount of debt, closing on £3 trillion, thanks to the Tories, almost tripled it on their watch. We basically have no economic growth to speak of whatsoever. Real wages have barely done anything for people in this country for the last 2 decades, and we've seen the tax burden on people in this country, tax as a percentage of GDP, at World War II highs. Again, as Nigel said, we can thank the Tory party for all of that. The question is, who is going to bear the brunt of these, quote, tough decisions? And here's our perspective. It is foreign nationals who should first bear the brunt before we ask any British citizens to make sacrifices. And that is the fundamental fault line right now in British politics. We are working incredibly hard to make Nigel Farage our next Prime Minister. And the reason for that is he will make every decision as Prime Minister, as will his Cabinet and his MPs, through the lens of what is in the interests of British people. So we have put together a suite of proposals that Rachel Reeves could enact immediately in the budget she's about to announce that would amount to saving and raising £25 billion, more than enough to plug the black hole that she has created through her mad policies and negate the need for tax rises. And in most of the proposals we're announcing, the vast majority of them, it is foreign nationals who are being asked to deal with the difficult decisions and not British citizens. So let's run through them. The first one is welfare. Now, we've already announced that our belief is UK welfare should be for UK citizens. I think that's an entirely reasonable position. And yet the fastest growing line item in any welfare bill you look at where we actually have data is indeed foreign nationals. And data is a key point. One of the reasons why the establishment is so worried about Nigel becoming Prime Minister is because we will no longer hide the data on all of the line items of the welfare budget and usage of the NHS by foreign nationals. The government, the Tory government and Labour now, continue to hide most of the line items in terms of how much demand there is on those services and welfare programmes from foreign nationals. The exception is universal credit. And yeah, universal credit has been ballooning in terms of foreign nationals utilising it. So we are saying we will no longer, the British state should no longer pay universal credit payments to foreign nationals. The bill for that will be, in terms of how much that would foreign nationals are taking from universal credit, is £8 billion this year. We have assumed a 3-month notice period to be reasonable, and therefore if Rachel Reeves were to enact that policy, that would be £6 billion of savings this year. The next one is foreign aid. It is unconscionable that British citizens and taxpayers should be asked to fund foreign aid programmes when, for example, 15-year-olds in Wales have a lower educational attainment than 15-year-olds in Turkey. And by the way, that number for Welsh 15-year-olds is below the OECD average. But I say Turkey for a reason, because the British taxpayer has been forced, because of the inept political leadership in this country, to send hundreds of millions of pounds in aid to Turkey, a country whose 15-year-olds do better than Welsh 15-year-olds. Charity begins at home, and that's before we even start talking about the fact that, for example, while Labour was resisting calls for a statutory national inquiry into the grooming gangs, they were wiring £19 million to Pakistan for child exploitation prevention programmes. That is going to make British people's blood boil. It is unacceptable for us to continue to be funding foreign aid at this level while the country is in the state that it is currently in. Of course, we would aspire in the long run to do foreign aid. Why wouldn't we? But charity begins at home, and it is unacceptable to ask hard-working British people to pay ever more tax to fund these programs. So we are proposing a hard cap of £1 billion on foreign aid. That would still allow us to ring-fence our commitments to Ukraine, and it would allow us to keep our seats at multilaterals like the UN and the IMF. That would still save £10 billion a year. The next thing we can talk about is the immigration health surcharge. Now, this is actually quite extraordinary because the government's own impact assessment, when it was recently increased to £1,000 roughly a year, stated very clearly that that £1,000 merely represented 38% of the actual per capita, i.e. per person, per year cost of using the NHS. That's literally in the document. That's not speculation. It's in the impact assessment. And yet the Tory government signed off on an effective 62% discount for foreign nationals to be able to use our NHS. And I'll give you just one example. And this is a very long document. It's online. You can go and read it. It's abundantly clear the government has actually got no idea how much the true cost of foreign nationals using our NHS actually is. But I'll give you just one data point to demonstrate why any sort of discount is totally morally reprehensible and economically illiterate. Let's look at maternity rates. The birth rate for foreign nationals relative to British citizens is about 30% higher. Each birth costs the NHS £5,500. That is one reason why, by the way, maternity wards, just like GP surgeries and many other parts of the NHS, are totally backed up. I want to give you another data point on the NHS, because we've already started doing quite a lot of work on what's gone wrong. And the fact of the matter is this: the population explosion has brought the NHS to its knees. Since 2010, the population in this country has grown by about 10%, roughly. And almost all of that, north of 90% of that, is through immigration. And what's happened to real, i.e. adjusted for inflation, NHS spending? It's almost doubled. It's almost doubled to deal with a 10% increase in the population. And insanely, and again, we can thank the Tory government for this, the country has fewer NHS beds since 2010. So it is clear that the marginal cost to serve in pretty much every vector in the NHS scales in really non-linear fashion, in exponential fashion, once capacity constraints are exceeded. And that is exactly where we are. Unless we get this population explosion under control, and Nigel has talked about this for decades, the NHS will not be able to recover, and that is really important. We can make a start. We can make a start by no longer offering foreign nationals a 62% discount on being able to use our NHS. We can then talk about foreign prisoners. So we've known for some time now that north of 10,000 foreign nationals languish in our prisons, and remarkably, countries like Pakistan, to whom this country sends hundreds of millions of pounds in aid every year, our inept politicians, for whatever reason, are unable to even get Pakistan to take back their convicted criminals who are sitting in our jails. And we're still sending them hundreds of millions of pounds in foreign aid and issuing them visas in all sorts of different ways. And then so that would save £500 million adjusted for deportation costs. That's based on onward data that was published this week. And then you have the PIP announcements, the PIP reforms that Lee Anderson and I announced recently. Now, by the way, most of these numbers, Nigel mentioned ILR, the numbers I'm giving you, the £6 billion in the form of savings this year if we were to halt welfare universal credit payments alone to foreign nationals, the £10 billion saving in foreign aid, the £5 billion, by the way, that the immigration surcharge increase would raise this year. All of these numbers compound at dramatic rates over the coming years. Those numbers I've given you are just for this fiscal year, because we're talking about plugging the black hole and negating the need for tax rises. But to give you an idea on this, in that press conference we said by 2029 the PIP reforms that Lee and I proposed would save £9 billion per year in 2029, namely no longer paying for non-serious anxiety, but actually putting those people on back-to-work programs, which all of the academic research in Europe shows that That is the best possible thing you could actually do for the recipients of that welfare too, many of whom are very young and being tossed on the scrap heap. But this year, that would still save £3.5 billion. So you top all of those numbers up, you get to above £25 billion. And these are savings that Rachel Reeves could choose to make in her budget that is coming up. We urge her to make these changes. And the fact that despite us doing this press conference and our pleas, the likelihood she will choose not to do those things and instead choose to raise taxes on British people is because Labour is making the conscious and deliberate decision to continue funding extortionate amounts to foreign nationals to the detriment of British citizens. And I don't know what to call that, frankly, in my view, is treachery. I think it's appalling. British people are sick and tired of it. So those are our proposals. And we're pleading with Rachel Reeves. Let's enact these. Let's raise and save £25 billion, plug the black hole that you've created, and put British people first. Thank you very much.
Zia, thank you. And that is the central message of today's press conference, that putting up taxes in this budget is a choice. It's a choice the Chancellor is going to choose to make in whatever form, in the end, they manifest themselves. What we do know is that an increasing tax burden is demotivating, is sending more and more people abroad. And I really worry, particularly about the number of sort of 30-something entrepreneurs, people like him, who are leaving the country because they just really fear and worry about the direction that we're going in. And once again, I want to reiterate, we as a party are proposing massive cuts in spending, and particularly massive cuts in welfare spending. And we're the first people really to have the courage in modern times to lay any of this out. Now, as ever, we will take our questions, beginning with our favourite broadcaster, the BBC, and Alex Forsyth.
Thank you very much. You are talking again today about some pretty big numbers, 25 billion. Can I just press you on the workability of some of what you've announced? You said you would stop foreign nationals claiming universal credit, including those with EU settled status. That's protected by the withdrawal agreement. What gives you any sense that the EU would renegotiate that agreement? And if you say you'd act unilaterally, have you done any analysis of the potential costs when it comes to possible retaliation by the EU, including on trade?
Well, firstly, on the point, on numbers, the last accurate figures we have are 2015, at which point there were 4 times the number of EU nationals in the UK getting benefits as there were UK citizens in Europe receiving any kind of benefits. But the numbers since then have exploded.
Yep, and so since then, the number of EU nationals in the UK claiming welfare has increased sevenfold. Sevenfold. So the facts on the ground have changed. And therefore, look, we have a choice here. Either you have a government, which we've had now for years, that throws their hands up in the air and say numbers like, for example, foreign nationals claiming universal credit, that was 950,000 about 3.5 years ago. 3.5 years ago. That number is now 1.3 million. That's 350,000 more foreign nationals claiming universal credit in this country. That's happened in 3.5 years. So you tell me this, are we supposed to just stand by and allow that to get to 2 million, 2.5 million, 3 million? Or are we actually going to say, sorry, we actually need to renegotiate this because this is patently unfair?
Well, I think the whole relationship with the European Union needs renegotiating. It appears that the Starmer approach is surrender, 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 starting with our fisheries, starting to make contributions again. I mean, the whole thing is mad. It is most certainly not what people voted for. And they were very, very clear. Labour in the general election were very, very clear there'd be no backturns at all on our relationship with the EU, and there've been several already. But look, the relationship clearly on this, and given the explosion of numbers, the relationship is hopelessly out of kilter. We'd like to negotiate something with the EU to show we're good neighbours on a reciprocal and fair basis. Jack Carson, next up from GBNews.
What impact do you expect the increase in the NHS surcharge to have on waiting times? And is that money that is that ever going to be reinvested into public services, or is that only ever going to be a saving for the public purse? And just on the Home Secretary's announcements yesterday, do you think that they will stop the boats?
Look, I thought that what the Home Secretary said yesterday in rhetorical terms was extremely encouraging. Extremely encouraging. It's just that in realistic terms, I'm not quite sure that it will survive her own backbenches and a vote in Parliament, and I can't see that any of it actually works. I mean, you can tell the judges, please interpret the ECHR and the Human Rights Act differently, but in practice you can't actually make them do that, given the current group that we've got. So, frankly, I don't actually think that most of what she said will make any difference at all. And as for the gimmick, you know, we're going to take away people's watches and earrings, and I mean, this is just never going to happen. And even in Denmark, which of course is what they were citing, even in Denmark, I think only 17 people have had valuables removed from them. And by the way, Denmark too, now beginning to struggle with its own policies directly as a result of the European Court of Human Rights. So look, rhetorically, fine, following very many of the things that we've been saying for some years, but in practice, I doubt much of it will actually happen.
Yeah, and on your question regarding the NHS, look, we've made this press conference, and our proposals are to plug the current fiscal black hole that Rachel Reeves has created so that it is not necessary for her to raise taxes on British people. You know, with regards specifically to the NHS surcharge, you actually read that impact assessment. The changes we're proposing would not have that meaningful delta on demand. Even if it did, frankly, there's far too much immigration in this country.
Yeah, thank you. Jasmine Cameron-Chilesh, ITV News.
Thank you. Jasmine Cameron-Chilesh, ITV News. You say these cuts will raise around £25 billion. Is it your expectation that if they go ahead, a reform government wouldn't have to increase taxes such as national insurance or income tax? And just secondly, if I may, the Home Secretary has urged you, Mr Farage, to, quote, sod off after you suggested she was auditioning to join Reform. What's your response? And just to confirm, would Reform MPs vote with the government on their asylum changes if needed?
Yeah, I did notice actually Robert Peston arriving in the room just as we started. Well, she seems to quite like using bad language, doesn't she, the Home Secretary? There's been quite a bit of it over the course of the last 48 hours or so. I mean, look, for her to say she's not in the least bit interested in what Reform has to say is clearly utter rot. They're obsessed with what Reform has to say. Just look at every Prime Minister's questions on a Wednesday and look at the Prime Minister or every other frontbencher that gets up in any single debate. And if Reform didn't exist, would she have made those announcements yesterday? No, she would not have done. In terms of the vote, and I'll pass to Zia, in terms of how would we vote, well, in terms of the rhetoric, we support it. But in terms of the reality, why would we vote for something if we're convinced that it can't actually work? I also wonder, when will this actually come before Parliament in the form of primary legislation? Or is this just another, as we saw with Rishi's Stop the Boats, is it just another of one of these big performative exercises to say to the Red Wall audience, look, we're really with you, you don't need to go away and flirt with those ghastly reform types. You know, when is this actually going to come before Parliament? Because there are many other things this government have promised that haven't yet made their way through primary legislation.
Yeah, and listen, I would just comment, my personal perspective on this is that it was Keir Starmer who accused Nigel of being racist, if you remember. And I put it to you that if Nigel Farage had sat at a press conference and announced that a Reform government would start taking jewellery away from people coming across on small boats, Lord only knows what would have happened. And I take great exception to that, actually. I do take great exception to that. And I do also, one of the points about that particular policy is my view is clearly entirely performative. Because I don't know who they think is coming across by small boat. It's not 50 Cent and Lil Wayne. And so therefore, taking their gold chains away is not going to raise anything like enough money to make any dent on the asylum budget. But look, the savings that we have outlined here, as I said, we've put them together carefully because they are things that Rachel Reeves can actually enact. Case in point being, for example, we have put in a 3-month notice period on the ending of universal credit payments. These are things, these are not fantasy, these are real things Rachel Reeves could choose to do. And as Nigel said, these are choices Labour is making.
Yes, and it's before. It's before. Just look at the graph, look at the trend, look at those that will get benefit rights over the course of the next 3 years, and understand that the numbers we've talked about today will be significantly bigger by the end of this Parliament, which won't be in 2029. I'm pretty confident about that. Moving on, Tamara Cohen, Sky News.
Thank you, Tamara Cohen, Sky News. You're talking about finding these massive savings. Reform are in power in various councils. You promised massive savings then. They've struggled to find those savings, and many of them are looking at raising council tax. Why should voters feel reassured it'd be any different if you were in power nationally?
I did not make a single promise, not a single promise, in that election campaign that we'd be able to freeze or cut council tax. I never said it once. And do you know why? Because I realised the massive debts that we were inheriting from those county councils. It's such a shame. If you guys had focused on local government before the May the 1st elections, maybe the levels of debt would not have got as bad as they have. Now, of course, there's a huge focus on county councils up and down the country. Richard Tice laid out very clearly yesterday in a press conference the £330 million of savings we've already made, but he also made the bigger, broader point, which links actually directly into what we're talking about today, that there is a massive problem with the Send budget, a massive, massive problem with the Send budget. And this is going to need national government to work with local government to reduce those burdens. And it's a case of overdiagnosis, it's a case of misallocated budgets, it's a case of some of the most extraordinary expenditure. I mean, I wouldn't mind owning a taxi firm in Lincolnshire. It sounds like very good business. So there are a lot of the impact on those local councils does come from national government policy. Are we determined to make changes? Yes. Will we cut debt? Yes. But can we give people a free ticket at this moment in time on council tax? No, and I never, ever thought we would be able to at this stage. But I think the analogy that was given yesterday, if I listened carefully enough, was that we're 12 minutes into a 90-minute game. Did I get that right? Well, there you are. Marvellous. Let us move on to Martin Beckford from the Daily Mail.
Thank you. Just following on from Tamara's question. So will you be content if reform-led councils increase council tax by the maximum allowed 5% next year, or will you tell them they can't do that? Thank you.
Well, we can't tell them what to do. It's, I mean, they are their own living, breathing organisms. I would very, very much hope that any council tax rises will be limited to inflation. That is very much my aim and aspiration for our councils. But I repeat the point. If you actually look at the numbers, we have inherited massive, massive debts. Massive debts. It isn't just at a national level that the country's in trouble, it's in big trouble at a local government level too. But I would just want to say one more thing, if I can, on this, and it is that last year 7 county councils had their elections cancelled in the name of local government reorganisation. This year, we understand, and in fact the Times I think have covered this better than any other newspaper, that the leaders of those Tory councils are urging the government to postpone the elections again because they're worried that reform might win them and oppose the local government reorganisation. I mean, imagine that. Imagine the democratic will of the people being discovered. So we would challenge very strongly the government and say, let's go ahead with the 7 county council elections. And by the way, part of that debate will be how we've run the other county councils. Let the public judge. So I would urge that very... Otherwise, you're going to have elected Conservative county councils who will, by the time this proposed local government reorganisation goes through, have actually sat in their positions for 7 years. And I think democratically that's unacceptable at any level. Martina Bett from The Sun.
Thank you very much. You want to cap foreign aid at 1 billion, but do you think that should come with conditions? For example, making every penny of that conditional on countries taking back illegal migrants, for example, and if they refuse, then they get nothing. And just quickly, on the confiscation scheme of jewellery and other assets, are you saying that you're against that?
It isn't going to happen in a month of Sundays. I'll bet you any money you like, we do not take a single possession of anybody, well, unless it's a gun, of anybody crossing the English Channel by dinghy. And as Zia says, you know, if I dared to answer your question in the affirmative, I can't even imagine what some of the historic parallels that would be drawn and published would be. And that really gets to the heart of yesterday's event. You know, it was performative to a very, very large degree. Even if she believes this stuff herself, and clearly she is very much more from the Blue Labour wing of the party, even if she believes it herself, it just isn't going to happen. Camilla Tominey from The Telegraph. Sorry.
Oh yeah, I'm happy to take that one. So we wouldn't even categorise. So listen, we want a hard cap foreign aid at £1 billion for the foreseeable, right? Until Britain's finances are in a position where hard-working bricklayers in this country are not being asked to pay ever more tax. In terms of making it conditional, well, what we would say, as we outlined in Operation Restoring Justice, our deportation plan, we allocated £2 billion specifically for paying foreign nations to take back their illegal migrants. So we wouldn't even call that foreign aid. That's very simple. You know, here's an incentive to take back your illegal migrants in our country so that we can basically ensure that we have proper immigration law here.
Yep. Camilla Tominey, Telegraph.
Morning, thank you. Camilla Tominey for the Daily Tea. Just a personnel question, mindful of the fact that you think there's going to be a general election in 2027, and you've been very critical of the current Chancellor. You've scrapped the tax cuts that Richard Tice wrote into the contract with the people at the last general election. If Zia Youssef is now crunching the numbers for the announcements you're making today, should we presume that he's your preferred choice for Chancellor over Richard Tice now? Thank you.
Lovely try, but you should... No, it's very good. I mean, no wonder you're so well paid. But I'm just not playing your silly little game, sorry. Right, moving on to the next question. Max Kendix from The Times, who has covered the local government cancellations better than any other journalist.
Thank you. Couple of questions. One on, which was kind of asked before, but would be good to get addressed more fully. Is your aim to go into the next election making a promise not to raise any taxes whatsoever? Are there going to be solid commitments around that, or conversely, do you think there's an area that should be taxed more? And Zia, I wonder, Shabana Mahmood said yesterday, when she was being accused of being divisive by a Lib Dem MP, that she's the one regularly called an effing P word and told to go back home. Is that an experience of racism in public life that you sympathise with?
Go for it.
Yeah, well, look, I've answered this a few times this morning on the morning round. So, number one, I deeply sympathise with her for being in receipt of such appalling racism. That must be deeply unpleasant. And look, obviously different politicians have different reasons and motivations for saying and believing different things. I do somewhat take exception to this conflation with, or this association with, concern about immigration, legal and illegal, and racism. I do take exception to that because for, I think, decades now, and I've just been campaigning on this issue for decades, people in this country have voted time and time and time and time again for less immigration. Not because they're racist, not because they're running around shouting the F word or using the P word at people, but because they believe Britain should have borders, they believe in sovereignty, they believe in the rule of law, and they believe that if you pay taxes in this country, you should assume to actually get public services that make sense for you. So it's a subtle thing, and again, I have deep sympathy, of course, for anyone who receives that kind of racist abuse. Lord knows I've received abuse too, just like every frontline politician. But this notion that one should conflate concern about immigration, which, as she did in the chamber yesterday, with such appalling racism, I do have something of an issue with that.
Yeah, Melanie Phillips in your newspaper today makes some very similar points, actually, in a very powerful article. Look, we're a party that believes we need tax cuts. that the tax burden is too high, it's a disincentive. And by the way, I want lots of people moving back to Britain. I want people moving back to Britain who are going to pay lots and lots and lots of tax. Because if you drive away the wealthiest, you drive away the highest taxpayers, which means a potentially higher tax burden for everything else. But I think what we've shown you, or I believe what we've tried to show you over the course of the last few weeks, is that we fully understand that we can't even talk about tax cuts until we get our spiralling debt problem in this country under control. Equally, there needs to be a big change of culture as well when it comes to work, productivity, success, and maybe we should be championing entrepreneurs that do well and make money rather than portraying them as being evil for having done well. So there are some big cultural shifts that are needed as well. No, we want tax cuts. The tax burden is too high. We're committed to doing that, but first we're showing you that we can make the cuts and do the things that will give us the room.
Can I just say one other thing on that? It alludes to an earlier question as well, which is that I do think there's something of an underappreciation in the media about the changing financial situation since the last general election. Yeah. And the country's finances have deteriorated meaningfully, even from the shambolic and deteriorated state they were in as a result of 14 years of Tory government. And if you were to look, and we can have this conversation again the day after the budget, but my assessment is, any reasonable assessment, assuming that Rachel Reeves does not do the things we're proposing here today, sadly, is that after the budget, just to unwind that incremental new taxes that Rachel Reeves has imposed on the British people, the mad inheritance tax changes, including on farmers, the 2% increase in national insurance contributions for employers, the sugar tax, all of these things she's talking about, will be north of £60 billion. And Lord knows we would love an early general election, but by the time we get to the next general election, in all likelihood, my view is that we're going to be at north of £100 billion just to unwind the appalling tax rises that Rachel Reeves would have implemented. So we've got to be straight up with the British people about that.
Absolutely. Jonathan Walker from The Express.
Thank you, Nigel. I think it was Zia this morning highlighted a web page that you've set up for people who are interested in defecting to reform. I don't suppose Shabana's really going to fill it in, but are you able to tell us anything about how many people have applied, and how do you decide who to accept and who to not accept?
In terms of defectors, I mean, the rule's very, very simple. We want people to come to us who we think will add to us, help us as a party, help us as a movement, as opposed to simply using us as a tool to revive their political careers. That's the criteria, plain and simple. Sophie Wingate from PA.
Thank you, Sophie Wingate from PA. On renegotiating with the EU on benefits for EU citizens, can you guarantee that it wouldn't lead to retaliatory measures and higher prices for British consumers? And have you had any exploratory talks with the EU officials to see how open they might be?
No, I'm not terribly popular in Brussels most of the time, it has to be said. They're quite pleased to see the back of me in many ways, although the European Parliament's very, very dull now that the Brexit Party aren't there. It's a negotiation. You know, it's a negotiation, and you go into a negotiation with a very clear idea of what your objectives are and what your interests are. And your interests ought to be the national interest. And the whole disaster of the EU renegotiation from the very, very early days was it was viewed by Theresa May and others as a damage limitation exercise as opposed to a rejuvenating opportunity. And so we finished up with a very bad deal, but currently the Prime Minister is trying to make considerably worse. We will adopt a different approach, and you can never predict how negotiations will go, but I do think that we have a team of people who've been used to negotiations, who know what the tough side of life is when it comes to business, when it comes to putting together contracts, putting together deals, and I would argue we've got a far better chance of doing something in the national interest than any of the careerists that have gone before us. Maurizio Alencar, City AM.
Hi, Maurizio Alencar, City AM, thank you.
Some of the criticism of Labour has been on plans to create a so-called smorgasbord of tax rises based on quite volatile items. But then this package is also talking about some volatile items such as net migration. So, you know, is this savings package and slight surcharge fees package also not based on very sort of unpredictable forecasts? Thanks.
No. Just have a look at the graph. I mean, you're City AM, for goodness sake. Just have a look at the trend. The trends have now been well established for several years, and actually the numbers are getting worse, and the predictions for those numbers, whether it's PIP, whether it's universal credit, all of this will be considerably worse this time next year, and even worse the year after that. The trend is very, very clear, and this is about arresting and turning around that trend.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, the only number that could in any way be described as being reliant on a variable is the one on IHS that you flagged, the immigration health surcharge. The 5 billion number we just touted as being the saving is based on the current OBR forecast for net immigration. But I also said in my speech, because we've done the numbers on this, if they cut net immigration to zero, which is what our policy is, it would still save north of 3 billion quid. So that's still 23 billion pounds, more than enough to negate tax rises.
Emilio Casaliccio from Politico.
Hi, thank you very much, Emilio. You say that you made no specific promises about council tax before those May elections, but reform local groups did make very clear promises. So what will you do to keep better control over what these people promise on essentially your behalf in local areas? And are you able to say something just a bit more general about that experience, what councils, these reform councils are finding, the challenges that they're finding in terms of saving money or in terms of making difficult decisions for savings that actually are proving very unpopular or the government won't let them do? What have you learned from this experience of some form of governance about what you should be promising ahead of the election and how a reform government might need to kind of temper expectations?
I was incredibly careful in the run-up to those county elections not to make false economic promises. And I promise you, you will not find a leaflet officially sanctioned by the party. You will not find a clip or an excerpt of anything I said on the street or on camera or to you or wherever it may be where I made any false claims about tax and council tax. And I can assure you, having travelled and having met, I can't even think, but probably 800 to 900 of the 1,300 people that stood, 600 people that stood for us, I didn't hear anyone making false promises on council tax. So I think, you know, the messages that were coming from the central party through the senior membership team were very, very loud and clear. Lessons, yeah, I mean, I think, you know, getting anything to change in this country is difficult. It's difficult because of inertia. It's difficult because of the status quo. It's difficult because there are plenty of people living in the marzipan layer, you know, on a public sector with the promise of great pensions, with maybe not the longest working hours in the world, many of them thinking since the pandemic that actually work from home was a suitable alternative. Yeah, getting things to change is hard. I think that's perhaps the biggest thing that I take from these first few months, and that is to a very large extent why, it's getting back to the Express question really, that's very much why Danny Kruger has come into the party to oversee a team to think, how are we going to deal with those challenges with Whitehall and elsewhere? But yeah, that's my big takeout. Okay, we're rattling through. Will Hazel from the iPaper.
Thank you. Do you support Shabana Mahmood's plan to deport the children of failed asylum seekers? Because I think earlier in the year, Reform rode back on plans to deport the children of illegal migrants in your mass deportation plan.
Look, you know, my job is not to make your life easier, and so I'm going to say this. The absolute priority with deporting those who've come illegal are young, undocumented males of fighting age, many of whom will do great harm in this country to women, to girls, join crime gangs, and that is the absolute priority, and that remains my answer. Lucy White from Bloomberg.
Thank you. I wanted to ask about steel. At the moment, the EU has proposed much higher tariffs on steel that we are trying to negotiate our way out of. If you were to torpedo relations with the EU by, for example, withdrawing from the ECHR or by treating their citizens here differently to the way we treat our own, how do you expect that to impact on these industries that are so reliant on our relations with the EU? Because the steel industry has said the tariffs at the current level that the EU is proposing would be incredibly damaging.
No, and I understand that, but that's all part of a negotiation, isn't it? That's all part of a negotiation. And, you know, when you're negotiating against someone that sees weakness, they will keep hammering you. You know, that is the world that we live in. And we've shown weakness since 2016. Time after time after time. And frankly, under Keir Starmer's leadership, it is craven weakness that we're seeing on fishing and everything else. So yes, these are issues, as are trade issues around the whole of the rest of the world. But this is about a complete reset of our relationship, and one that is much more in our national interest. And, you know, steel is a very difficult subject anyway. I honestly don't believe that if Richard Tice and I had not gone up to Scunthorpe on that day, I honestly don't believe this country would be producing any primary steel at all. And that moves on to a whole bigger debate on energy and the sheer catastrophe that net zero, that the attempt to become the Saudi Arabia of wind, and onto this government is for not just our traditional manufacturing industries, but forget data centres, forget AI, forget crypto, forget the entire 21st century economy. If we continue with our current energy policy, we simply won't be competitive and won't be able to do it. And energy will be, you know, very much, I think, a centrepiece of what we fight the next general election on. George Eaton, New Statesman. No, not here. Adam Cherry, Guido Fawkes.
Thank you. The Chancellor next week is set to announce a milkshake tax. What is Reform's position?
My favourite subject.
Right. What is Reform's position on sin taxes? You mentioned the sugar tax earlier. Would you abolish it? And under a Reform government, if I go into a restaurant, would I be able to buy a Coca-Cola and get it refilled on limited times?
Oh, I've seen that. I mean, you know, it's as if we're all to be protected from ourselves and kept at home, wrapped up in cotton wool. Just take tobacco. Just take tobacco. The Australians have gone bonkers. A packet of cigarettes in Australia costs about 35 quid, maybe nearly 40 quid. So if you're living in Melbourne and you're in a criminal gang, forget cocaine. Forget, there's no money in cocaine. The money's in fags. And as a result of this, there have been 40 premises firebombed over the course of the last 2.5 years, as the tobacco gangs fight against each other and burn out shops that are selling under-the-counter cigarettes. And you can go back to Adam Smith, if you like, who talked about brandy taxes. And if brandy tax is too high, guess what happens? You get smuggling. And I think when I take that down to sugar, well, clearly there is not going to be a black market in milkshakes. I would fully understand that. But they're hot, when they're chucked in your face, they're really vile, I must tell you. I just think we're not doing enough through education and just banning things and taxing things and saying in that particularly famous chain that you can't fill up for a second time. I mean, it's just overreach on simply on the most astonishing level. Archie Earl from Unheard.
Hi there. I was wondering if you could tell us anything about if Reform has any plans to implement a Trump-style visa ban on any countries, especially in light of Shabana Mahmood's announcements.
Well, the visa ban that Shabana Mahmood talked about yesterday was actually, yes, a very sensible negotiating tactic. Why wouldn't any government looking after the national interest do that? It was one of the most attractive things I thought she said. Let's show some muscle as a country, and we can do that with Nigeria, etc. Even Eritrea, maybe, I don't know. But so there's much we could do. But I just, again, say to you that it all sounded great it's all supposed to neuter support for reform. I just don't believe any of it with this government, this cabinet and these backbenches and the leftward movement that we're seeing in Labour politics. You know, the drag that is coming now from the Greens, from, there won't be Jeremy Corbyn because he can't run a bath, but there is that gradual drift to the left. I just don't believe it'll ever happen. Right, 2 or 3 more. Anna Gross from the Financial Times. Just would be under the hour, just so.
The immigration health surcharge, in all of the documentation that I've read, it's calculated on the average cost to the NHS of migrants who are eligible for the surcharge. So I'm confused about where you got this £2,700 figure from, which I can't find. Also, when the government has increased IHS before, the number of people whose fees are waived goes up because fewer people can afford it. So wouldn't that reduce the revenue from this policy? And also, what are you going to do about the people who say, look, I literally can't afford it, and then their fees get waived?
If I was to go to Australia and work in Australia and I couldn't prove that I either had the cash in my account or the health insurance for up to 4 years, I wouldn't be let in. Zia?
Yeah, no, it's spot on, right? So the first point to make is that there's a very substantial document, which is the government's own. It's the Home Office impact assessment. All the numbers are in there, and it literally states very explicitly that the per capita, per year cost of the NHS is north of £2,700. And they set, the last Tory government set the surcharge at 38% of that. And you can read the document. It's a very, very long document, but it's abundantly clear that the Home Office and the government actually has no idea what the actual cost is. And the reason why I laid out, for example, yeah, it's all in there and in the document that we'll publish. But the reality is, if you just looked at maternity rates, for example, contact with the NHS and per capita costs in the NHS, in reality, yes, you have an average, yes, you have a median, but it's massively driven by significant events, one of which, for example, is a birth. And the migrant, the foreign national birth rate is 30% higher than it is for British nationals. And each one of those births costs £5,500. There's absolutely no justification for keeping the number of that. Now, there are also, as you say, a number of exemptions inside the IHS. One of which would be for ILR. Now, obviously, our plan is to abolish ILR altogether, but if Rachel Reeves doesn't want to do that, she could just remove that exemption. Obviously, asylum seekers, all of these other sorts of people don't have to currently pay. Nor, by the way, I want to be crystal clear, NHS workers are currently exempt. We would retain that exemption. So we're saying even in a net zero immigration scenario, it would raise £3 billion. Based on current OBR forecasts for immigration this year, it would be £5 billion.
David Burke from The Mirror.
Hiya, thank you very much. In a hypothetical situation where a company were to go bust, it's a big local employer in an area, under your proposals, the British citizens on the workforce would have the safety net of support, but their colleagues, neighbours from the EU or from overseas in some way wouldn't. They'd also have their own living costs, their own families, etc. Do you think that's fair, and do you think the wider public think that's fair?
I just think the model that we've been pursuing for basically quarter of a century of importing as much cheap foreign labour as we possibly can has been a benefit to some employers, especially big employers, but the net effect on the British economy, it's been catastrophic on productivity, and it has, as the years have gone by, just brought upon us a massive range of social costs through dependence, etc. We cannot continue with this current model. I understand that for some people there'll be short-term concerns. Of course there will be. But what we're saying is we have to turn this around. And frankly, you know, to have so many millions of people of working age not working is the thing that is going to have to be addressed. Thank you. Peter Walker from The Guardian.
I'm hidden here, so I'm going to stand up. If I can return to the very, very first question of this quite long press conference, which you didn't completely answer from the BBC, has the party modelled at all what the economic consequences of your actions on EU nationals, what would be the case if the EU hit back, for example, on trade, or are you convinced that they won't? And if I may, I asked Richard this yesterday. He basically said he didn't particularly have any concerns about the views of your new head of the student organisation, who has argued quite vehemently on X that people from minority ethnic backgrounds are not necessarily British, even if they're UK born and bred. Do you share Matthew Goodwin's views? And given the fact he's in the party, does this indicate that your proud record you've talked about a lot of keeping far-right elements out of your parties, is that era now gone?
No, and we will always keep far-right elements out of our party. I've always done that. You've known me for goodness knows how many years. I've always made sure we've never had BNP types, etc. in. I think what Goodwin said, it was nuanced. And if you look at the nuance, it perhaps doesn't look as ugly as you try to make out, is the point that I would make. But of course, as soon as you set up a youth wing, you're going to have problems with everybody. And we knew that before we did it. I would argue with Europe, they're still selling us lots of cars, you know. They're still selling us lots of cars. We're still buying 20 million bottles of champagne every year. You know, we need to get back to a basic trade agreement. And look, you know, have we costed... There are all sorts of good and bad scenarios that can happen every single day of the week. I am confident we can come to a much better deal with the European Union. I was going to ask one last question. Robert Peston, do you have a question as you were late in the room?
I think I'm interviewing you, so can I say?
Fine, very good. Yes, one more. Sorry, I apologise. Not on my list, I apologise.
No, I'm later. Thank you. You've painted a very gloomy picture of the public finances in this press conference, but would it be fair to say that the solutions you're offering, in contrast to your avowedly radical solutions on immigration, are perhaps cautious? 25 billion savings is just about half what the Tories suggest they could find, 47 billion. Even your PIP changes are less than what Labour thought they could find when they first thought they could manage this. So is that the message you want to give to the electorate? We're radical on immigration, but there will be incremental change on the public finances.
What we've given you today is just one snapshot of one area. We might remind you of what we said about the Boris wave and indefinite leave to remain, and what the cost of those individuals are likely to be over the course of the coming decades. 200.
Yeah, I mean, it's hundreds of billions if you actually were to look at the Boris wave, and that
over decades.
Over decades, indeed. And look, we're going to have a lot more to announce in this regard. I will say it's quite funny though with the media. You know, one minute we're putting big numbers out there and we're accused of fantasy economics, and then we put smaller numbers out there and we go, that's a bit cautious. So look, here's the point. Here's the point. As Nigel said, this is a very specific set of proposals for Rachel Reeves that she could enact immediately. And by the way, that 25 billion, that compounds, as is in the document that we will share with you, that compounds significantly and multiplies over the coming years.
Thank you, everybody.
Well, it's now nearly 11 o'clock on Tuesday, the 18th of November. We are live across the United Kingdom. You're watching Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Miriam Cates.
Reform leader Nigel Farage has set out his plans to fill what the government calls is that major financial black hole. He deems the budget will be an attack on working people.
And the Tory leader, Kemi Badenoch, has also been setting out the Conservatives' ideas for the budget, and we'll bring you those ideas in just a moment.
What I can see happening is division. Anger and resentment can turn to hate. It's a human frailty, and I can see this happening in our country. It's my job to stop that drift towards hate, to offer people solutions that can work, that can dissipate the anger and the resentment they're feeling.
That's the Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood telling GBNews about her plans to fix Britain's broken borders after she told Parliament all about her asylum shake-up.
And some breaking news. Updated ONS figures on net migration show that net migration was higher in 2023 than previously thought. It's gone up from 906,000 to 944,000.
No wonder the Tories lost the election. The Prime Minister insists he will lead his party into the next general election, but a new poll shows half of Labour voters want him out now.
And MPs will debate and vote on the government's new Troubles legacy legislation today.
Yes, 25 years on from Tony Blair's secret deals giving the IRA amnesties, this Labour government now has real problems over the veterans.
So we've just had that double whammy press conference. Of course, we're taking the Reform conference,
We
but
did.
we'll bring you news
I think GBNews viewers and listeners are probably glad we went for Farage and not Badenoch.
well, tell us on your say. And we will, of course, be updating you on the content of Kemi Badenoch's budget speech later on. But an interesting press conference from Reform, and really, obviously, lots of questions from journalists. But really, the main thrust of it was that British
Foreign
government
nationals should pay.
Yeah, British government should be allowed to govern in the interests of Britain, which doesn't sound particularly controversial to me.
I think I even heard that expression, charity begins at home.
Yes.
Indeed, it does.
Well, we'd love to know what you think about that press conference and all the other things we're covering today. Send your views and comments to
gbnews.com/you'll say, but first, here are the headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good morning to you. Just after 11 o'clock. Well, the top story this hour, the Home Secretary standing firm after unveiling one of the toughest asylum shake-ups in decades. Shabana Mahmood says she will get her reforms through Parliament despite anger from Labour's left and unexpected backing from the Conservatives. Her plan brings in 20-year waits for permanent residency, tougher and faster removals, new visa bans and an end to guaranteed financial support. But critics warn the package is dystopian and inhumane. But Shabana Mahmood insists the package will restore order and control at the border.
There are some people in politics today who think you can either ignore the problem and just assert that it's not there and that somehow it's made up, it's misinformation, fake news, and if you just don't talk about it, it will somehow go away. There are others who will speak the language of inclusion and support for diversity, which I also agree with, but who will then not look to any solutions for the problems that we face. So they will shut down any possible solution and then therefore they are hypocrites because they have nothing else to offer.
In other news, the competition watchdog has launched sweeping investigations into some of the UK's biggest brands, from StubHub to AA Driving School, Gold's Gym and Wayfair, all over concerns about misleading online pricing. The CMA says these are the first cases under its new consumer protection powers after reviews flagged tactics like hidden fees and pressured sales. It's also written to 100 other companies across 14 sectors, warning them to clean up their practices. The watchdog's chief says the price that shoppers see should be the price that they pay. A political storm is brewing over the Chancellor's next budget, as Rachel Reeves comes under fire from both Reform UK and the Conservatives today. Opponents accuse Rachel Reeves of planning stealth tax rises to plug a multi-billion-pound budget shortfall, while Labour says the Tories have barefaced cheek after they crashed the economy, leaving what she says is a £22 billion gap behind. But the pressure is mounting. Kemi Badenoch earlier saying Sir Keir Starmer needs a reality check and urged all parties to face up to the scale of the problem and stop dodging tough decisions.
It is wrong of him to deceive people, lie to them and make them think this is going to be easy. Government is difficult. That is what we learned. And we need parties in our country, not just Reform, but the Greens and the Lib Dems, to get a grip and start fixing the issues we have rather than living in la-la land.
Breaking in the last hour or so, the migration picture here in the UK has been sharply redrawn, data confirming the peak was bigger than first thought and the fall since then much steeper. New ONS figures show the peak rose to 944,000 in early 2023, not the 906,000 previously published. Then by the end of 2024, net migration had fallen to 345,000. That is far lower than the 431,000 originally estimated. The shift comes after experts overhauled how they track movement, replacing an old border survey with detailed national insurance records. Officials say the updated system now gives the clearest picture yet of who is arriving and who is heading out. And President Donald Trump is celebrating a major diplomatic win after the UN Security Council endorsed his Gaza peace plan. The resolution approves a temporary international stabilisation force in Gaza, along with a new transitional governing body called the Board of Peace. It also tasks that force with demilitarising Gaza, using all necessary measures, a clear signal that military action is permitted if required. But Hamas has rejected the plan. It says it won't give up its weapons without recognising a Palestinian state, calling its fight legitimate resistance. It could set up a potential confrontation between the group and the new international force that is set to enter Gaza. You're up to date just after 11 o'clock. I'll be back with you shortly. Now, though, it's over to Andrew and Miriam.
Tune into GB News Radio wherever you are. Online, on DAB digital radio, on TuneIn, on Radio Player, and on your smart speaker. Just say, play GB News.
Hello, welcome back. You're watching Britain's Newsroom. We're live across the United Kingdom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Miriam Kate.
Well, what did you think of the speech?
Well, the Farage and the Zia Youssef press conference, well, I thought it was very sensible, and their arguments that the British government should govern in the national interest, I think, is a good one.
It's like America first.
Yeah, that's right. And the idea that I think it's a good point to make that if the Chancellor puts up taxes to pay for benefits and foreign aid for people who are not British or, you know, will never have paid into the British system, that doesn't make sense. And it's not, it shouldn't be controversial to say so. So I thought that was a very good point.
He's going to pick a fight with the EU, but I think he wants to, because he said, they said the number claiming benefits here at EU nationals has gone up 7-fold. Nigel Nelson, you'd be horrified by that, wouldn't you, fighting the EU, because you love the EU?
I also think the speech was sort of economic nonsense. If you're looking at EU citizens who've settled here, they contribute more to the British economy than your average British citizen, about £2,300 a year more. So, first of all, we want to keep them here. Secondly, there was no idea...
But Nigel, the ones who claim benefits don't. But on average, yes.
Well, no, I mean, we're talking about universal credit. So some of those will be working and have a top up.
If you claim universal credit, you are by definition a net beneficiary. So I'm sure you're right on average. The mean EU worker contributes more. But if we look at separately at people who claim UC, universal credit, they clearly don't.
Right. So UC is claimed by roughly 16% of the British population, British-born people. It's claimed by under 1 in 10 of the EU migrants here. So EU migrants are a benefit. So the next thing that
that's false logic, Nigel.
No, it's not.
British people who are British have a right to those benefits. What they're arguing,
and so do EU citizens.
They shouldn't have that right.
I get the argument, but then the next stage comes down to how you actually deal with that with a withdrawal agreement, which actually guaranteed these things. These people were living here; they'd made their lives here. Some of them have been here decades, and so part of the withdrawal agreement was to make sure that their conditions carried on. So the moment we start messing about with that, the EU will retaliate against 1.3 million Brits who live in Europe.
Yes, but there's far more living here.
I know that.
Far more living here.
But that is not an argument to say, because there's far more living here, that's not an argument to say we want Brits in Europe to be penalised because of what's happening here.
It is when you're talking about retaliatory action, because that goes both ways, Nigel. That can go both ways. It's just like trade. If trade becomes...
Well, trade's the next one. That's the other retaliatory action that could happen.
We have things that they really, really want called fishing licences. You know, we have lots of power in trade. We don't use
overall, we would be the net loser if we ended up in a trade war with the EU.
Yeah, so say you. But we have power. Spain and France, I promise you, would not want to give up one fishing licence, Nigel. We have a lot of power. We just need to have the kahunas to use it.
We're going to keep this fresh, because we're going to have a listen now to what the Tory leader Kemi Badenoch had to say, because she was speaking at the same time.
Is that next week, Rachel Reeves is going to put up people's taxes to spend more money on benefits. Everything else she says is a smokescreen for this simple fact, a fact she cannot deny. Let me walk you through it. Earlier this year, the Labour government tried to bring down the welfare bill, a bill which under them is set to rise to £100 billion a year on sickness benefits alone. In opposition, they seemed to think this wasn't a problem. They arrived in office with no plan to cut spending. But last autumn, seeing that they were in a financial hole, they thought maybe they could find £5 billion of savings. Of course, nowhere near enough, but at least it was something. But when it came down to it, the Prime Minister and the Chancellor were no match for their left-wing backbenchers. They capitulated and ended up passing a bill that costs money instead. And Mel will talk about that in more detail. But in summary, Labour MPs created a new £5 billion hole in the Chancellor's estimates. And since then, we have had nothing but drift. Last week, we had the farce of the Prime Minister accidentally firing the starting gun on the race to replace him, shooting himself in both feet in the process. So now, instead of trying to make savings in the budget, we are seeing a rush of announcements to appease Labour backbenchers and try to shore up his position. Just a few months ago, Rachel Reeves was saying she couldn't afford to scrap the two-child benefit cap. Now it looks like it's becoming her latest U-turn. So far from bringing down the welfare bill, she's going to add another £3.5 billion to it. That's £8.5 billion she's going to have to find next week in taxes. More taxes to pay for more welfare spending. We need to call this out for what it is. Labour are raising taxes to pay for Keir Starmer's weakness on welfare. All this government is delivering is higher taxes and out-of-control spending. And nobody voted for this. The British public don't want higher welfare spending. They want people to be in work, providing for themselves. Keir Starmer has already broken his manifesto promise not to raise tax on working people with last year's jobs tax. That jobs tax has been passed to all of us through higher prices, lower wages and lost jobs. Unemployment has gone up every single month since Labour have been in office. Instead of putting up taxes, they should be making savings. They should look at our plan, which we will happily share with them. We have already announced, as many of you know, how we would save £47 billion, including £23 billion from welfare. But they are going in exactly the opposite direction. Ever more spending, ever more welfare. If this Labour government scraps the two-child benefit cap, I want people to know that a future Conservative government will bring it back. The cap makes sure people on benefits have to make the same decisions about having children as everyone else. This is fairness. But this is not the kind of fairness that Labour believe in. Only the Conservatives believe in the fairness of the two-child benefit cap. Every single other party in politics, the Lib Dems, the Greens, and even Reform, want to scrap it. Right now, Nigel Farage and Zia Yusuf are holding a press conference on how they would save money. But in reality, they want to increase benefits by scrapping the two-child benefit cap. They just don't get it. None of these parties do. Absolutely. The Conservative Party are the only party in this country committed to living within our means. However, it is Starmer and Reeves who are actually running the country. And what they are planning to do is freeze income tax thresholds so that more and more people are dragged into higher rates through a stealth tax bombshell. Rachel Reeves even said at the last budget that extending the threshold freeze would hurt working people and take money out of their pay slips. But apparently, she doesn't mind doing that if it will fund more benefits and shut her backbenchers up. Funnily enough, the amount she will raise from breaking her promise on thresholds is almost exactly what she needs to splurge on welfare. The fact is, they are hiking taxes on people in work to give handouts to people out of work. The last group of people who might still vote for Labour. And if it wasn't already clear that Labour are the party of welfare, not the party of working people, it is clear now. Because these changes they are making are not fair, they are not right, and we will oppose them every single step of the way. We have identified £47 billion of savings, including £23 billion from welfare reforms. Labour repeatedly dismissed that figure because they do not want to admit that any savings are possible. They have given up trying, and that means things will only get worse. There is an alternative. We spent a year doing the hard work to find savings. Our golden economic rule means every pound saved will be split between cutting the deficit and cutting taxes or funding key priorities, like abolishing stamp duty, a measure which will stimulate economic growth, unlock the housing market, and create jobs. Our golden economic rule is honest, it is disciplined, and it is rooted in simple conservative principles. Spend less, tax less, reward effort, restore stability. This is our alternative. It's the Conservative plan for a stronger economy. Cut spending, cut tax, back business, and get Britain working again.
Yeah.
And now, over to Mel.
Thank you, Kenny, and good morning, everyone. The Chancellor wants us all to believe that tax rises are necessary, that they are inevitable, that there is no other way. That simply is not true. This budget is about choices. Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer have shown when it comes to controlling the benefits bill, they lack either the inclination or the backbone to act. In the summer, Labour made a panicked and unfunded U-turn on their welfare changes.
So that's Mel Stride, the Shadow Chancellor, talking after Kemi Badenoch. And we had GB News' political correspondent Catherine Forster was there at the press conference a little earlier, and she asked Mrs Badenoch a question.
You've said Nigel Farage is also holding a press conference at the moment. He's come up with £25 billion of savings, apparently, including ending universal credit payments for all foreign nationals, including EU citizens with settled status. What do you think of that proposal? And also, if I may, freezing tax thresholds, as you've said, is a tax rise on millions of people. You did it for years and years through to 2028. Why was it OK for you to do that, but not OK for Labour? Thank you.
So you asked what we think of the idea of removing universal credit from EU citizens with settled status. It is a bad idea. And it is a bad idea because we spent a lot of time negotiating those rights, not just for EU citizens in this country, but British citizens in other countries in the EU. You start unpicking that, and you start unpicking all of the work that was done year after year after year, with a lot of pain and, and effort during those years when we were negotiating Brexit. Nigel Farage says that he will just renegotiate those rules. This is completely ridiculous. This man does not know what he's talking about. I am a former trade secretary. Even with friendly countries, trade negotiations are very, very difficult. That is why Keir Starmer has given away the Chagos Islands to Mauritius, because they don't know what they're doing. The idea, and we heard these arguments even when he was campaigning for Brexit, that it would be so easy, we'll just walk in and we'll tell the EU what to do. It doesn't work like that. And it is wrong of him to deceive people, lie to them, and make them think this is going to be easy. Government is difficult. That is what we learned. And we need parties in our country, not just Reform, but the Greens and the Lib Dems, to get a grip and start fixing the issues we have rather than living in La La Land. Yeah. And on the point of tax thresholds, it was wrong to do that. I have said that taxes were too high under previous Conservative governments. I am the new leader of the Conservative Party. I'm not a former Prime Minister. I am talking about what the Conservative Party will do when we are in government next time. I don't have a time machine to go back and fix what other people did. We can also see that those things didn't work. We have learned those lessons. Let's try something new. Let's back business. Right now, businesses are struggling, high street businesses in particular. That's why we want to lift the business rates burden off the high street. It is business that creates jobs, not government. That is why we need to get the burden off business ASAP. Lifting the tax threshold, changing the tax thresholds, freezing the tax thresholds, like Rachel Reeves looks like she's planning to do, is just going to create yet more problems like her last budget created. Thank you, Catherine.
Well, that was Kemi Badenoch there, and we're joined now by our panel, GP and writer Dr Renee Honderkamp and GB News' senior political commentator Nigel Nelson here in the studio. Let's start with you, Renee. Interesting that the Reform press conference and the Conservative press conference were at exactly the same time. Perhaps a bit of a scheduling problem there. We did cover the Reform conference. What do you make of that edit of Kemi Badenoch's speech there?
Look, I look at Kemi and part of me feels sorry for her because I think she's inherited something that's almost impossible to save, so nobody could have done a better job. I wish she had more gravitas. I wish when she spoke I looked at her and saw a leader that was going to grasp these things, but I don't, sadly. I like lots of what she says now, but I think it's too late. Nobody's listening. They're hearing blah, blah.
I think they're being subjected, frankly, Renee, to almost a two-term punishment beating. Voters were so fed up with them after 14 years. They weren't delivering. They weren't doing what they said they should be doing. They were arguing in public. They were a rabble. You know this. Remember, you were part of the rabble.
Yeah, but it does seem, and that's absolutely true. And the last government behaved almost in a socialist way many times, celebrating how much money they were spending.
Yes.
But we are now getting a much more traditionally conservative message, Nigel, from the Conservatives, talking about spending restraint, talking about cutting the debt and the black hole, if you want to call it that. But do you think that enough people are listening to this, Nigel?
I don't think. I think for the reasons that Andrew just said, that they're not listening to the Conservatives. And I think that Kemi there made a good point, that the benefits bill hitting 100 billion is clearly far too high. You've got to do something about that. Labour messed it up because what they did was they were going to slash 5 billion off it and pretend that was welfare reform, when actually it was purely a money-saving device. Now we've got a proper review happening, which was why it was right for Keir Starmer to U-turn on that one. A proper review to see where we're spending the money, why we're spending it, who needs it, who doesn't need it.
Take another year.
It may well do, but if you don't find out where the money is going, do the people who are receiving it actually need it? You can't stop.
Couldn't they have done that in opposition? The figures are all there.
Well, no, you couldn't do that in opposition. You have to do that kind of exercise in government. I mean, the Tories should have done that before the bill sort of went shooting upwards.
Nigel, the proper review has already said that there are no savings to be made.
So far, he hasn't finished it yet. So Stephen Timms is still doing it. He hasn't found any savings yet. You're right, and it may be there aren't any. In which case, then it would have been hugely cruel.
When there was in the personal independence plans, but Labour ducked it.
Well, we don't know where it was.
Even the Lib Dems say that they could be cut back.
Well, it may be able to be cut. The point I'm making is that all you were doing was cutting disability benefits by 5 billion without looking at what the disabled actually need, and equally whether people were claiming money that they don't need.
Right. I mean, look, there are two things here, aren't there? Nigel is, I think, absolutely rightly saying that the people that should be getting the money from the taxpayer who really need it should be British citizens. Absolutely. Why should we be paying for foreign nationals to actually come here and get benefits? So that's number one, and I think that's the right thing for him to say. But number two, the conversation is bigger, Nigel, than saying where can we make savings. The conversation is a tough one, but it is the bar set too low? Are we giving people money who could work? You know, it's really, really sad if your back hurts too much that you can't go and stack shelves somewhere or carry heavy bags. But if you can get up in the morning and go shopping, you can sit at home and work from home from a desk.
But that's my point. That's exactly my point. That's the kind of thing a review should look at. Are people getting money that shouldn't have it? Are people not working who could? I mean, one of the things that we really need to do is that only 1 in 10 of the interviews to determine this are done face to face. One of the things I agree with Reform on is they're talking about all interviews should be done face to face. I agree with that. It'll cost a bit extra, but you're more likely to get an idea about who needs the money and who doesn't.
But you are. But in this day and age of social media and 24-hour news, the moment that they put people in front of a medical panel, you get online stories about how I was forced to walk across the room when my knee was bending backwards and I really was in so much pain I wanted to cry, and everybody says that's terrible, it's inhumane. So there's always this baying crowd to not allow the big conversation. And of course, the more people that are benefiting from these benefits, the louder that voice will be. It's like the conversation about obesity. It's impossible to have because in the UK now most people are overweight or obese.
But you have to ignore that, don't you? You have to ignore what social media is doing. doing and get on with the business of government. As Kemi Badenoch just said, government is not easy.
Can I just say to you, though, what I think from the reform press conference and speech, it is quite clear what the strategy is, what the narrative is for reform. Foreign nationals should pick up the bill for the mess we're in, not hard-working British taxpayers.
Absolutely. That was the right way to start.
Strategy. I'm clueless what the government strategy is because I have never known a more chaotic build-up to budget in all the years I've been working at Westminster. You've been working there even longer, Nigel. Have you ever known a more chaotic...
No, I think this has been appalling, and I think that we've come to now a crossroads here about budgets in the future. As you'll remember, in the old days, there used to be budget purdah, which meant that no Chancellor or Treasury Minister said a word about it for several weeks beforehand until the budget itself.
They didn't want to unsettle the markets.
No, and that's the other point. That what's happened in this case is that first we are given the idea that income taxes are going up. The markets quite like that.
Told us it 3 times.
Then suddenly it's abandoned because apparently the OBR says there's a bit more money.
Fibs. Because Labour MPs wouldn't wear it.
So then the markets don't like that.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's going on at the moment is that people, because of the uncertainty, won't spend money, and that's affecting growth. And Labour is basing everything on future growth.
It's a shambles, isn't it?
One tax rise that we probably will get in the budget that Kemi Badenoch referred to in her speech was the freezing of tax thresholds, which of course the Conservatives did for years and years.
It's an income tax rise.
It is an income tax rise. Every year people's wages go up because of inflation, or they're given pay rises due to inflation. Every year more and more people are caught in either the basic rate of tax or the high rate of tax or the additional rate.
So it's a tax rise. It's absolutely a tax rise, and it was criminal when it was done under the Tories, and it's criminal for Labour to continue it. And I think they just hope that people won't notice that that is also a tax rise. They're just fiddling around the edges, introducing things that are not going to break their manifesto pledge, because they clearly learnt last week that that would be electoral disaster.
I also think there's just a possibility, I don't know what you think about this, Nigel, that there were so many Labour MPs saying no to a rise in income tax, there was a possibility that the budget wouldn't be passed.
Well, if that had happened, it'd be the end. As you say, it'd be the end of the government. I mean, the government would have to go. If they couldn't get the finance bill through, that's it. That's a government gone.
Do you think that is a possibility? There were enough Labour MPs opposed to the tax rises? It felt like it to me.
I don't know whether enough, because they do have a huge majority. I do know there were some. They were very upset with the idea that they stood on a manifesto, that manifesto would be breached and they would be held personally responsible. MPs are.
What happened to the Lib Dems over tuition fees?
I was just about to say that tuition fees were an example where everybody turned against the Lib Dems, and then look what happened to them in 2015.
Eviscerated.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's what do we think of Badenoch? Do you think I know you said you don't think she's got the stature.
The gravitas, yeah. I just don't. Look, I like what she's saying, and I think she is returning to what are considered to be traditional Tory ideas.
Tory conference, which was quite a novel experience.
It was.
It's been a while.
It's been a long time since I heard such a conservative
and that's
speech.
all great, but I just don't think anyone's listening.
But what do you think about her attacks on reform? Obviously, she has to attack reform, they're a rival party. But she points out in her speech, she said, right now, Nigel Farage and Zia Youssef are arguing against the two-child benefit cap. Of course, they didn't actually argue that.
At which point people pick up their remote and switch over to see it.
Well, indeed. But perhaps a year ago, 2 years ago, arguing that they were populist on economics, arguing that they were socialist on economics might have washed. But the changes they've made recently is in a much more fiscally conservative direction.
Yeah, I mean, look, all of the parties are absolutely terrified of reform, as well they should be, I think. And I think it was very odd planning for Kemi to have her speech today at the same time as Farage's. Was she really thinking that people would deferentially go for her? Because that's lunacy. And where are the people around her to say, look, as nice as an idea that is, you need to do it as they finish or whenever. Yeah. So that was lunacy, and I think suicide, that most people would have tuned into the other side.
Had she gone afterwards, he could have responded to what was said.
And looked like she was actually listening and thinking about it. But she doesn't. And these foolish errors that they're all making seem, like PR 101.
It is, yeah. I've never known such bad PR on both sides, Nigel.
Yeah, I mean,
they keep bringing in new people. They brought in Tim Allen from the Blair era. It's done nothing. It's not improved a thing.
No, and I mean, I think that when we're talking about Kemi Badenoch and Keir Starmer, May elections are the big thing.
Right,
Nigel, Renee, thank you so much.
60-second news update now with Sam Francis.
Very good morning to you, 11:30. The top story this hour, the Home Secretary is standing firm on one of the toughest asylum shake-ups in decades. Shabana Mahmood's plan brings 20-year waits for residency, faster removals, visa bans and an end to guaranteed support. Critics, though, call it dystopian, with Nigel Farage claiming Labour is just copying Reform UK. A political storm is already swirling around the Chancellor's budget. Rachel Reeves is facing fire from Reform and the Tories, accused of plotting stealth tax rises to fill a £22 billion gap. Labour, though, says the Conservatives have barefaced cheek after they crashed the economy. But Kemi Badenoch says Sir Keir Starmer needs a reality check. UK's migration picture has been sharply rewritten this morning. New ONS figures show the peak at 944,000 in early 2023. That is higher than first reported, before plunging to 345,000 by the end of 2024. Officials say a new tracking system using national insurance data gives the clearest picture yet of who's coming in and who's leaving. Competitions watchdog has launched a clean-up of major UK brands. StubHub, AA Driving School and Wayfair are among those under investigation for misleading online pricing. The CMA has also warned 100 more firms to clean up tactics like hidden fees, saying the price that shoppers see should be the price they pay. And abroad, a major diplomatic win for President Trump. The UN Security Council has backed his Gaza peace plan, approving a stabilisation force and a new governing body there. The mission is tasked with demilitarising Gaza using all necessary measures, but Hamas has rejected it, saying its fight is legitimate. Those are the headlines for now. I'll be back with your news at midday.
Take the GB News family with you on any device. As long as you have an internet connection, tune into GB News anywhere on the planet or beyond.
Well, coming up at noon, we've got Good Afternoon Britain with Cameron and Nana. Welcome to the studio. What's coming up?
Hello. Well, we have an interview with Nigel Farage coming up with our very own political editor. Yeah, incredibly interesting. Reform UK's alternate budgets plan, seeing that basically if you kind of cut a lot of foreign aid and all the rest of it, you could potentially save billions. I'm sure Christopher Hope is going to be asking him.
Quite clearly, foreign nationals should pay. Why should hard-working Brits pay?
Well, also, he was talking about the amount that foreign nationals pay using the NHS, of course. And the amount is just over £1,000, when really it works out at over £2,000.
And the billions they're claiming in universal credit.
Although there was that question, though, where they said, well, where are you getting the figures from at the end?
Yes.
There's your use of that.
And also, is it going to be tough to renegotiate with the European Union in terms of taking away benefits from European settlers who are in this country already? That was part of the Brexit agreement, so that could be tough for them. Yeah.
Also, we're talking about the BBC.
Good.
What have they done now?
Well, what haven't they done?
Yeah.
No, Jeff Banks will be in. Remember the clothes show?
I do.
Jeff Banks, yes, superstar. He'll be talking about how the founders of the BBC would be turning in their grave if they could see how badly the BBC are behaving in a way. And just for me, as an ex-BBC personnel presenter, as it were, and a journalist there, the things that they did would not have been allowed when I was there. So that was against the BBC guidelines when I was there. And I knew you weren't allowed to do that because they are very, very good at training you as what you're not meant to do.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, Cameron, Nana, thank you very much. Up at 12.
We're going to be joined by two winners at a huge award ceremony last night, celebrated, hosted even by a person I know rather well. It's called...
Well, I was there.
You were.
I was there. I didn't host it. But only winners are allowed on this show. Hey, Andrew.
This is Britain's Newsroom with GB News. You hosted part of it, didn't you?
Hello again, this is your GB News weather forecast coming to you from the Met Office. The cold theme continues for the next few days, but with that there will be some rain around and also, unsurprisingly, a bit of snow and a bit of ice. There's an area of low pressure currently making its way southwards across Scotland into England as well, and it's this that's the driving force for outbreaks of rain. Many places likely to see some wet weather at times through today, albeit across the far southeast of England, staying largely dry through daylight hours at least. With that rain and the cold air, yes, there will be some sleet and snow around, perhaps to lower levels over parts of Scotland. Elsewhere, it just looks like it will be over higher ground. Temperatures are on the low side, markedly lower than they have been recently, near normal towards the south, a few degrees below across northern parts. As we go into this evening, still more snow likely across the highlands of Scotland and any modest higher ground over northern and eastern parts of Scotland in particular. Some showers piling into the north and the west of Scotland. Scotland, and some of these could be falling as sleet, maybe a bit of hail mixed in. A few showers across parts of Northern Ireland and showery bursts of rain across much of England and Wales as well. Some of these could be a little bit on the heavy side, and there could be some winteriness, some sleet, some snow over modest high ground as well. As we go through the night, the showery rain, sleet and hill snow will push its way southwards and eventually start to clear away, but it is looking a bit wet at times across some central southern areas, with drier, clearer weather developing across parts of Scotland in particular, and where we get those clear skies, temperatures plummeting, widely falling below freezing. Rural spots could get into negative double figures. So tomorrow gets off to a bit of a wet start across some south-southeastern parts, but that rain clears away, and then there's actually a lot of fine sunny weather to be had. That being said, areas exposed to that brisk northerly Arctic air will see more showers, which could be wintry across parts of northern Scotland and also down the east and the west of the UK. Temperatures, if anything, lower than today.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Decisions made in Washington aren't just shaping America, they're shaping Britain too. From migration to global security, from crime to health. Whatever happens in the White House today
will be felt in your town or city tomorrow.
That's why The Late Show is live from Washington, D.C.
Cutting through the politics to show you what it all means for Britain.
The Late Show live every night at midnight.
Only on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom. It is 11:38 and you're watching on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Miriam Cates.
So, on-the-ground heroes, ordinary people doing brilliant work, were celebrated last night in the heart of Westminster at the Centre for Social Justice Awards. You were there, Miriam.
Yes, so I do a bit of work with the Centre for Social Justice, and it's got this amazing sweep of around 700 small charities across the country that do incredible work on the ground. And it's called the Oscars of the small charity world. I think it's the 21st year now. Amazing celebration in Central London. Invite the finalists and announce the winners live on stage. People doing some phenomenal work up and down the country.
It was set up by Ian Duncan Smith.
Yes, the Conservative
after he was ousted as Tory leader.
Yeah, and it's one of the most successful think tanks. But also, it's not just a think tank. It's connected to people doing real things on the ground across the country. And we're delighted that in the studio now we have two of last night's winners. We've got Ricky McCaddock, who's the Chief Executive of Street Connect, and the founder of Grace Enterprises, Matt Parfitt. Matt, Ricky, thank you so much for coming in to the studio. And now we have got some footage, actually, of when you both won last night. But let's just find out a little bit more about your charities and what you do. So, Ricky, tell us about Street Connect and how it was set up.
Thank you. So, Street Connect is a charity that partners with churches to deliver addiction outreach and support services. It's a charity birthed out of myself and my wife's own lived experience of addiction. We were both trapped in addiction for many years, and through our newfound faith in God and love and support of others, our lives were completely transformed. And that's the hope we take out onto the streets, into our recovery programmes, and we've been blessed to see many, many lives being transformed and going on into employment.
How did the church help wean you off this? Was it a drug addiction?
Yes.
Or alcohol, drug addiction?
Drug addiction, yes.
How did the church help wean you off it?
So, it was quite ironic in one sense, is that so I had no faith background, and someone who'd been on a rehab programme called Teen Challenge, it was a Christian-based programme, had relapsed, and I was using drugs with them, but there was something different about them, and they told me about this place. At first I was like, no chance, but I thought, do you know what, I'm going to give this a go, and it is probably the most significant and best decision I've ever made in my life, from someone who could never have seen myself in that way, to now seeing how God's used the mess of my past to actually reach and support many people and equip churches across the country to be able to tackle this problem in their community.
So how do you help people? Are people referred to you, or you meet them on the streets? What do you do next?
Yeah, we do take referrals from statutory services and other providers, but our largest referrals come from our own outreach initiative. Part of our model is we don't wait for people to come to us. Some of people with the biggest addiction issues and the most chaotic lives are not engaging with services, and really what we found, people don't need another service, they need connection. And what we bring is we accept people where they're at, we believe in them, we listen to them, and we walk with them on that journey. So we've got a saying, from the street to their feet to a life complete. And that's the journey on our 3-stage model. We do street outreach, drop-in cafes, try to help people into our recovery programmes, one-to-one support. We partner with rehabs all around the UK. And we've got aftercare support. We've got some houses there where people can come and stay with us. And you've seen one of the stories in the video last night, someone drinking vodka on the street about 3 years ago, and now got engaged with our services, went to rehab, and now he, since we did the film, has now completed his SVQ3 in health and social care and is now employed with the charity.
Wow.
Well done.
Well, shall we relive the moment that you were presented with the award by Rachel Riley, the Countdown star, last night? Let's have a look at this.
It's my absolute honour to present this year's CSJ Award to Street Connect. It's my absolute pleasure to present this CSJ Awards to Grace Enterprises, to Matt, to the whole team, and most importantly, to the people whose lives they continue to change.
So that was Lisa Nandy there announcing
Cabinet Minister, Culture Secretary.
Absolutely, announcing another winner, founder of Grace Enterprises, Matt Parfitt. Matt, congratulations to you as well.
Oh,
So tell us a bit about your charity, what you do.
Yeah, Grace Enterprises is all about creating life-changing jobs. So we employ people who've been homeless, been in prison, refugees, those who've been struggling with addiction. We provide holistic support as well. And what's interesting about us is we run our own social enterprises. So underneath the parent umbrella, we've got 3 different businesses. So a commercial cleaning company in Nottingham. Then we started a marquee business in Nottingham. And then we started a biscuit business called Half the Story, which you saw in the video last night. And that's the one that's really caught national attention. I'd always be saying it's not about the biscuits or about the cleaning or about the marquees. It's about loving the person in front of you, giving them an opportunity. And we believe that the best and most sustainable way of doing that, so we can pay everyone the real living wage, is through business. So we employ them and we see lives transformed.
And what sort of people are the people you're helping? Are they people who've had addiction problems as well?
Yeah, across the whole range. So we've got people who've struggled with addiction, people who've been in prison for one reason or another, people who are refugees or have come over here as asylum seekers, got the right to remain, people who've struggled with all domestic violence, mental health, physical health, any major barrier to work. We would employ anyone who's got the right to work and actually be saying, here is an opportunity to actually have hope and purpose. That's what we do, really. It's not really about biscuits. It's about hope and purpose and seeing lives transformed.
But your biscuits are quite something.
They are.
And you've been waiting for this all
That's it.
I heard rumours that M&S wanted, or no, British Airways were interested in your biscuits.
So it's phenomenal because people like what we do. Best of business, brilliant. So we've got to be excellent, but with a charitable umbrella. So yeah, we'd say our biscuits taste great. They're wrapped in a compostable wrap. They are delicious. That's only half the story. The real reason why all these big companies are interested is the other half of the story. It's the stories of lives transformed. But yeah, genuinely, when I'm saying best of business and best of charity, well, best of business means a great tasting biscuit. So if you'd like to try some...
Oh, we would.
Choc chip.
Not a bit too keen.
There's a choc chip there. Yeah. This one's lemon.
Oh, I'll go for lemon.
Yeah. And the original, which is also vegan. All of them, obviously, life-changing. And all handmade. This one is the green one. Handmade, made in our...
I'm going to go vegan, which is the most...
Oh, Andrew, that's the most Western you've done.
Yeah, exactly.
And Ricky, let's talk about these awards, because when people think about charities in the UK, they think about the big guys, the Oxfams, who receive the vast majority of donations. What's so special about charities like yours, and what do the CSJ Awards mean to you?
It means such a great honour to myself, our staff team, and to those that we reach, because ultimately that's what the night was about, the thousands that are still looking for their breakthrough, and that's what we want to bring, and it's a great exposure. Already got some great connections, follow-ups, potential church partners as we're looking to move from primarily regional, 22 partners at the minute. We're looking for 100 in the next 10 years, supported by 5 strategic hubs. So I've been in London for a week. and I've been meeting with churches, but I've got some funders to follow up on from last night. And it was amazing. On the evening, we got our award doubled from what was expected to be 20,000 to 40,000.
Wow.
That'll make a huge difference to us as a small charity.
We can hear your lovely Scottish accent. But where are you based now?
Glasgow.
You are in Glasgow, yeah. Which is a city which we know has got a major drugs problem.
Yeah, highest drug death rate in the whole of Europe.
Yeah.
And high levels of poverty.
So it's so important that you're operating there.
Yeah, we've got bases all around the city and the surrounding areas, and so we've seen hundreds of lives being transformed, and we reached over 2,700 people last year. Our model's like a filter. We work with less people as we move them through, but we're always trying to help people. What's next, and how can we support you towards?
And what are his biscuits like?
Amazing. The best biscuits you'll have.
In the film last night at the awards, it said that Britons consume more biscuits per head than anyone else in the world. Is that true?
It's something crazy as an average. But yeah, is that just this sofa? But actually, it's
just the whole way through.
I am not. That's you.
I think this is why it works, because it is simple.
Yeah.
It's relatable. We all enjoy a cup of tea and a biscuit. Nothing better for community. Tea, coffee, biscuits. And actually, I think it's in the British psyche. But there are lots of coffee companies doing amazing stuff. There are tea companies doing amazing stuff. But there were no handmade biscuits. So we thought, why don't we start a social enterprise biscuit company and see what happens from there, and we hopefully replicate around the country.
Now, this is the big killer Pulitzer Prize-winning question. Do you dunk your biscuits or don't you?
Well, Stu, co-founders from Manchester, and he was like, they have to be dunkable.
There we are.
So they will dunk.
There we are.
Don't worry.
Very important. We're glad to hear that.
Matt, Ricky, thank you so much for staying over in London to come and speak to us. Really, really well done as well. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Any more to come? We can give you some of that elusive holiday sun. Stay tuned.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
It's going to be an unsettled week across eastern parts of the Mediterranean with intense thundery rain by the weekend. Further west, it's drier, but there will be some rain around northern coastal parts of Spain, also pushing into parts of Portugal and West Spain as well. Also some rain across southern Italy, but it's further east affecting Greece, Albania, Croatia and other nearby nations. This is where we're going to have the heaviest, most thundery rain, particularly as we go Friday and into Saturday. Bye-bye.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, this is Jubes & Co with you.
Hello everyone, Patrick Christie is here to GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Access the stories that matter to you. Take the GB News family with you on any device. And as long as you have an internet connection, tune in to GB News, anywhere on the planet or beyond. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
No matter the state it's in, this is our nation. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for a genuine, honest discussion on where we have been, where we are going, and where we are with the people who set the direction. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions, but every Friday night at 9 p.m. you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
No,
isn't it? Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun. Oh no, he didn't say that, though. I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Welcome back. MPs are going to debate...
She's nicking the biscuit tin. It's more on her side than mine.
Andrew, MPs are going to debate and vote on the government's very important new Troubles legacy legislation later on Tuesday. Joining us from Northern Ireland, from Belfast, is GB News' reporter, Dougie Beattie.
Well, yes, what a problem this actually is for the Labour government. This problem was left by Tony Blair's government because he wouldn't give the definition of a victim in the Northern Ireland peace process, and to keep the government behind us going, they decided to give out letters of comfort and amnesties to the IRA that created 60% of the killings in Northern Ireland, a terrorist organisation. But in doing that, they left the door open for the ECHR to bring soldiers to court for terrorist charges. And now today, those veterans are very much opposed to the legacy bill that's coming in, and they're looking for the Labour government to stand over promises that was given to them, and they hopefully will decide to get those through.
Thanks, Dougie. That's it from Britain's Newsroom. Up next, Good Afternoon Britain with Cameron and Anna. We'll see you tomorrow if Miriam hasn't eaten all the biscuits.
Thanks both. Coming up, Nigel Farage, leader of Reform UK, has done a sit-down interview with our very own political editor, Christopher Hope, talking about Reform's alternate plans for the budget.
And also we'll be discussing more, going into more depth with the BBC, with the fabulous Jeff Banks. He'll be live in the studio. We'll be discussing all of that and more after your weather.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boiler sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hello, very good morning to you. This is your GB News weather update from the Met Office. We have cold Arctic air pushing its way across the country at the moment, and that's going to bring some rain, yes, but also a bit of snow and ice. The rain's mainly across parts of Scotland, also feeding into northern England and North Wales, and there is some hill snow mixed in with this. The highest ground of northern England seeing something a bit wintry, but modest higher ground over parts of Scotland could see some wet snow down to around 150 metres or so, and perhaps 5 to 10 centimetres building up over the higher ground. Staying drier towards the south, but a few showers pushing through. For all places, a chilly feel for sure. Coldest in the north, some places struggling to get above freezing. Could see highs in just about the double figures across the far south. As we go into this evening then, more wintry weather across some higher ground of Scotland. Showery rain around the coastal parts, but modest higher ground, likely to see further snow building up as we go through the end of the day. Showers piling into northern parts of Northern Ireland. Some of these could be falling as sleet or snow, as can the showery bursts of rain across northern parts of England and Wales over the highest ground at least. Staying dry towards the south and southeast, clearer skies as we go through the evening and overnight. The showery rain, sleet and snow across northern parts gradually making its way further southwards. The further south it gets, the less likely you are to see anything wintry. That being said, some sleet or snow is possible across higher ground towards central parts. Clearer skies coming into parts of northern and western Scotland in particular, and here temperatures could really drop. A harsh frost, some icy patches, and we could see temperatures dropping into negative double figures perhaps. Later on as we go into tomorrow, we are going to see some showery rain pushing across parts of the southeast. Don't really expect any sleet or snow here, and then otherwise showers piling down on that cold northerly wind, so coastal parts towards the northeast and west seeing some showers. Some of these could be a bit wintry at times, more inland areas staying dry but pretty cold.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boiler sponsors the weather on GB News.
There's just 2 weeks left to see how you could win your Christmas this year paid for by us. First, we'll give you an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash. Then we'll give you a further £10,000 cash to spend on all your Christmas presents, even the tree. Christmas lunch, that's on us too, with £1,000 in shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite supermarket. Finally, a GB News Christmas goodie bag. For another chance to win, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB17 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 28th of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk then?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact is Trump made a good start. No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Britain was once the envy of the world. But look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m, only on GB News.
No matter the state it's in, this is our nation. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for a genuine, honest discussion on where we have been, where we are going, and where we are with the people who set the direction. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock, only on GB News.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We love Great Britain. We love its history, its culture and its tradition, and that's why we're so proud to be part of GB News.
You look genuinely emotional. Oh, come here.
GB News does pay attention to those who are ignored by the mainstream media.